Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1339 of the War News stream. And we have very big news yet again today. We have seen that the major U.S. carrier strike group has been redeployed to Venezuela from the Mediterranean. We've also seen that China has been exposed aiding Russian forces today. And also, Lithuania has closed its border yet again after a new Russian violation using balloons again. And we have very big news, and it's good to see you all once more.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments from multiple regions, including the major news that the Russian Federation is not only losing massively on the front lines in Ukraine today, losing the town of Torske as well as a significant area of land north of Pokrovsk, but they are also suffering a complete financial breakdown inside the Russian Federation, as Russian banks have announced today that Russian economic growth over the course of the year has now amounted to absolutely 0%. And is now going to be rapidly decreasing over the next several months towards to the end of this year. In the meantime, we have also been able to hear that the United States of America's Southcom area of responsibility will now be joined by the USS Gerald R Ford strike group, currently based in the Eastern Mediterranean, which has now been given orders as of today to set sail from the Eastern Mediterranean across the Atlantic and immediately into the Eastern Caribbean, giving us a very solid understanding that strikes against the nation of Venezuela and the Maduro government are most likely going to be inevitable at this point, but it also gives us a stronger timetable to know that these strikes will most likely be conducted after the 1st of November, which, for this channel's purposes, is incredibly good because we will actually be on air by the time that that's going to start happening to be able to cover it for all of y'all. In the meantime, we have also seen major developments still ongoing within the region, as the Colombian president has now been sanctioned directly today, along with his wife, for perceived actions in support of cartels and also in support of the general narco-terrorist operations that the United States have been fighting against within the area. We have also been able to see another airstrike on another vessel within the region over the course of the day, while at the same time, we have been getting additional developments of the weather that's in the area that is causing significant disturbances to any current military operations, and at the same time, we've also been able to hear that ISRs have been redeployed, including the ones that are almost in near prototype phases, to the island of Puerto Rico. At the same time, the United States of America has announced that they'll be training troops just miles off the coast of Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, while the Venezuelan government is continuing to try and posture itself defensively by stating that they will not kneel to the United States, while at the same time, Maduro is openly requesting that the United States does not invade the country and curb stomp the government. In the meantime, we have also been able to see that the armed forces of Ukraine have been able to hold their lines today and have caused significant casualties on the Russian Federation's armed forces, largely pushing the Russian Federation back in significant directions near to Torske and Pokrovsk. Meanwhile, Lithuania has also shut down its borders with the Republic of Belarus temporarily, as multiple balloons have been spotted once again over Lithuanian airspace, which has resulted in the closure of 2 airfields within Lithuania. We have also heard that the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has stated that they should stop where they are, speaking of the Russian Federation, and that the line should be drawn here, while the British, through their Prime Minister, have also stated that negotiations on the purchase and transfer of Tomahawk cruise missiles to the state of Ukraine is currently underway at the moment. While the Russian Federation is in an incredibly difficult situation, it does not appear that they're completely down and out, at least just yet. The Japanese state, or the state of Japan, has scrambled aircraft today in response to a near Russian aircraft violation that occurred near to the area of the island of Hokkaido, one of the most northerly part of the country, while at the same time, we've also been able to see that fuel transfers were being conducted between Russian ships and those of the Chinese today in the Malacca Strait, suggesting that while the Chinese are cutting down on purchase orders, they might be trying to find some form of a creative way to skirt around the sanctions and to continue to receive Russian oil and petroleum products, even while technically being adherent to the U.S. sanctions that were just implemented against Rosneft and Lukoil. We have absolutely major news today. We actually have a lot more news than what I just even said. There is a lot of major developments that have occurred over the course of the day, and we are going to be making sure to cover each and every single piece of the news that we have tonight in as much detail as we were able to get throughout the day. Of course, we're going to be starting with our largest stories first, and then working our way on through the stream, with the stories getting smaller in size as we get later on in. But of course, we are going to be moving on into the largest piece of news of the day, in which we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation is practically at the ropes at this point. It does appear that the Russian Federation cannot necessarily survive any longer period of time in the conflict, as breaking news did emerge today that military production for the first time in the war in Ukraine has actually fallen inside of the Russian Federation. The output of other vehicles, including tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, has slowed down more than 10 times in September, 6% compared to 61.2% in August. In September, the growth rate of Russia's military industrial complex unexpectedly began to slow from 2.4% in August to 0.4% in September. This is the first recorded time in the war that we have ever seen war production inside the Russian Federation begin to decrease. And that's something that's actually quite significant, because when we speak about the Russian military and their abilities, it's incredibly important to remember that they aren't an existent force within a bubble, and they heavily rely on Russia's war industry and the Russian government to be able to fund, finance, and produce materials and equipment for the Russian army to be able to use, and also pay the personnel that are a part of the Russian armed forces. This, in turn, is something that is starting to become more and more unlikely for the Russian Federation to be able to continue at the kind of rate and tempo that they have been for a while. With the Russian government's financial institutions beginning to shrivel up due to the lack of tax revenue that is able to be generated inside the country, they are finding themselves a little bit stretched to even afford to have new vehicles made for the Russian army. Most importantly, there's something else that we have to tell you all about the Russian industrial systems, at least for their war industries, that has been an Achilles heel that is finally hitting them at this point. While they are running out of money, they're also running out of actual tanks. And this is something that's always been deceptive about the Russian army, especially in the modern day, is that they have been known to have a large number of main battle tanks on paper, more so than any other country in the world, and also armored personnel carriers as well. This is more so of an exaggeration than anything, as the Russian Federation's main battle tank and infantry fighting vehicle force only exists on paper, and even at the beginning of the war, only a small percentage, around 30%, of the tanks and IFVs that they had on paper are actually operational and being used in the Russian army. The other thousands of tanks and APCs that they had on paper were actually sitting away in graveyards, for the large part, as we call them, inside of Russia, where these vehicles were literally just sitting around for decades with no one using them. And while they're still technically inside of the Russian Federation's armed forces and a part of their tank and APC or IFV force, they're not actually used. Since the Russians have started to take major losses in Ukraine, these tank graveyards have found a second wind. A lot of these tanks are loaded onto trains in their derelict condition and then railroaded directly to a Russian factory somewhere within the Russian Federation. There, these tanks receive engine refurbishments and generally refurbishments to the entirety of the main battle tank. Once the tank is refurbished, which costs a lot less, by the way, than actually building a brand new tank, they are then sent to the front lines to the unit that needs the replacement, and then it's used inside of Ukraine until it's destroyed about several weeks or a few months later. That has been the state of things that the Russian Federation has been working off of since the beginning of the war. And we've also seen that they've been working off of a similar type structure, even with their supply trucks like the Ural 4320s, which you can see right here, which is a very standard Russian supply truck. Once these trucks were destroyed in the thousands at the beginning of the war, even the trucks started to be replaced by the venerable Buhanka, which everyone knows incredibly well because it has become a sight on the front lines in Ukraine. The Buhanka has largely replaced the Ural 4320 as a usable transport vehicle because there are hundreds of thousands, if not several million of these in the Russian Federation, and these can either be purchased from civilians or requisitioned for military use. These are also being destroyed in large number, even larger numbers as a matter of fact, than their tanks and AFVs. In short, they're running out of vehicles to find to refurbish for military service, and we've known that that's been coming around for a while. Multiple satellite pictures throughout the last year have started to show that the Russian tank graveyards throughout the country are getting wildly thin in terms of the available number of vehicles, and it now appears that due to a lack of funds and also a lack of vehicles to even refurbish, they can't even keep up with the losses in Ukraine either way, and now their military protection is beginning to decrease. With this decrease now happening, this is what is going to follow. The Russian Federation has been able to slightly build up their forces in size through the war in Ukraine at current production rates. With the current production rates now dropping, we are most likely going to see that they will either have to cannibalize the new units that they have made throughout the war that are inside the Leningrad military district, which are poised to start a war with NATO, or they are going to have to start greatly reducing their combat actions in Ukraine and mitigate casualties as much as they possibly can. Or they will continue their offensive tempo inside of Ukraine, or their defensive tempo more so, and continue to lose vehicles that no longer are even replaceable at all. Either way, this situation is near dire and apocalyptic for the Russian military, especially with its fight inside of Ukraine. While tanks have been argued in the modern day by a lot of people to possibly be obsolete, tanks and infantry fighting vehicles still play a major role on the battlefields, even in the present day. And with the Russian Federation's main battle tank and IFV forces, or fleets, now diminishing by the hundreds per month for the larger part, it is highly likely that the Russian Federation may lose all or every bit of its offensive capabilities, because armor even still plays a major role in the Russian Federation's abilities to conduct offensive attacks against Ukraine's front lines and to be able to try and break through. Even more so still, not only on the war industry side of things is it looking bad, but on the financial side of things, it's looking even worse. Russia's central bank has cut its benchmark interest rate and said growth had slowed to almost zero as the economy sags under the cost of the Ukrainian offensive and Western sanctions. This is the Bank of Russia. This is the Russian central bank, and it has openly stated as of today that Russian economic growth in the country is zero. for the large part, and it will now be decreasing in the future because this has generally been pretty much a meteor that's now slamming into the floor and is going to be going well into the basement after it slams through the floor. The Russian financial systems can't even continue to take the strain that has been put on them from all of the existing sanctions and the Ukrainian attacks that have been conducted so far. Now, with the introduction of the new sanctions against Lukoil and Rosneft just yesterday, it is incredibly likely that the Russian Federation may start to collapse rapidly, especially financially, under the extreme new strains that have been created for the Russian Federation's financial systems, and this also will in turn even greatly affect the war industry outputs as well, as even if the war industry is able to find vehicles to refurbish, the Russian government will not be able to afford to refurbish these vehicles and try and put them out on the battlefield because they won't even have the money to pay anyone to do that job to repair those tanks. In short, the situation is already reaching an apex at this point, or a pinnacle in the crises that has now evolved in the Russian Federation on the financial side and on the strategic side. I would have to be honest with y'all. With the rate at which this is going financially and militarily inside the Russian Federation, our original projected timetable of the Russian Federation possibly collapsing within a year and a half may actually be optimistic, and that the Russian Federation's economic systems may actually collapse within this upcoming year or within less than a year from this point right now. It is a dire situation. Now, I know that I'm trying to paint this as much as I can for all of y'all from the news we've gotten today, but we also have to remember that this is the main statements made today on multiple months of additional reports and information that we've been getting out of the Russian Federation just from the financial side alone, showing that Russia's multiple industries are practically on the near verge of collapse. 3-day work days in most companies are incredibly common at this point because there's no one buying anything. The Russian railroads just had to lay off half of their staff because the amount of cargo volume in the country has been cut by half because of this war. Because that's been cut by half, no one's buying anything, guaranteed, because there's no one needing enough goods for the railroads to even transport at this point. The Russian oil industries, like Gazprom, Lukoil, and Rosneft, have already conducted massive layoffs within the prior months. Russia's largest agricultural manufacturer, Rostelmash, has declared that they will no longer be assembling new vehicles due to the complete lack of any new purchase orders or sales being made throughout the entirety of the country. Russian automobile manufacturers are now cutting down the 3-day work weeks, some of them even refusing to build new vehicles because no one's buying them because they don't have the money. Banks are having to now decrease the amount of credit lines they're giving to their customers because they are scared that they're going to start racking up massive credit card debt that they will never be able to pay off and don't even have a chance of paying off yet right now. All of that happening within just the past few months. And now today, we're seeing that this is reaching the Russian government, and not only are the Russian citizens broke and having an incredibly hard time financing anything on their own end, the Russian Federation's government is now having a hard time even financing the war, or for that matter, keeping the economy alive. And this has led a lot of people to talk about the ongoing situation in the Russian Federation, and the key reason why they have not been able to replace military vehicles, and the reason why the war industry is also shrinking as well. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so now that we're seeing that Russia is not able to replace their military vehicles that are being lost on the Ukrainian front lines like before, what is the main reason that is the case? Because right now it's a big mystery. We're having to sort of guess at this, why Russia is losing the production of their military vehicles. So it looks like 42% said it's due to material issues in production, while 40% said the companies are going broke, and 13% said Russia probably isn't paying the companies, and therefore they can't function. So right now, all we know is this. Right now, the companies in Russia are laying people off, and also they're cutting down the remaining employees' work weeks to 3 to 4 days a week from their normal 6 to 7 day work week. So that indicates to me big financial stresses on those companies. And I would also guess, since the Russian government is really losing money heavily right now, they're probably not paying these companies for every single purchase order they're putting in. That's my guess. Putin is probably giving them rain checks to get paid later, and they're expecting to get paid later. So Also, another thing to keep in mind as well is these military companies that are developing these vehicles for the military front lines for Russia, they also make other vehicles for the consumer market as well. So, one side of their business on the consumer side is getting hammered hard. They're already losing money there. And I'm sure also as well, the Russian government is not very diligent in paying those companies either. So, it's probably just a whole bunch of these issues here. But mainly, though, it's probably the companies going broke. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I wanted to be honest with y'all. It is generally, I would say, because of all of the above. The companies are going broke. We already know that. A lot of them are at 3-day work weeks. There's also an issue of getting any materials at all, or even having any production output in the country due to the fact that there's a large decrease in the available workforce. And on top of that, there's just not any tanks left to refurbish and modernize, or even refit just to their original standards when produced, and then put them out in the front lines. And on top of that, the Russian Federation's government doesn't even have the money, hardly from what we know, to be able to pay any of these companies. So I would actually have to say that I'm with the 41%, the 40%, and the 14%. I would say it's all of the above, as a matter of fact. Every single side of things in the Russian Federation is so bad that there is really no way to say it's one thing or the other. It's really a mix of all three of those options, rather than saying that you're unsure and undecided. And so I would have to say that generally is the reason why. Also, I see some people asking, well, how in the world do they refurbish tanks? Or how in the world does that even work? And I'll actually explain that to y'all really quickly, because it's an interesting side of things that exists in Russia. This is a T-72B3. This is the most modern and advanced version of the T-72. Now, what's kind of funny about this is that they already ran out of these about a year and a half ago. Most, if not all of them, were already destroyed, but we're going to use this one as an example, considering that it's practically extinct at this point inside of Russia. This looks like a new main battle tank, and if you ask the Russians themselves, they would tell you it's brand spanking new. But that's a lie. This thing is not new. This tank is actually about 50 years old, at least. These tanks actually are T-72As, and I'll show y'all one of the original T-72s, at least in their original configuration, like this one right here. This is actually a Polish T-72 at the Bovington Tank Museum, and this one is in its original configuration as a T-72A of the People's Republic of Poland's army. Now, this is the actual tank that sits inside, well, is actually a T-72B3, and there were thousands of these, no joke, that were sitting across Russia in lots, pretty much, grass lots, and they've been sitting there for decades, never used, but technically usable on paper. So when the Russians started to lose tanks in Ukraine, they started to say, well, we need to get more tanks. And so, because Russia is broke, they do what any broke country would do. They look at all of these tanks like this one that's sitting out in the field and has been rotting for at least 20 years, and they go, what if we just took that and refurbished it to make it operational again? And so then they were like, oh, this is a great idea. So they ship these off to the factories inside of Russia, the tank factories, that is. And the tank factories don't even build a new tank, they just refurbish this one. So what they do is that they pop open the engine bay, they go through the inside, give it a deep cleaning, they replace anything made of rubber, so rubber pipes, rubber seals inside the engine. Generally, they'll also refurbish the engine block completely. They'll give it a test to make sure that everything's running kind of optimally, at least as much as they can. And then that's when they go through and they add on everything else that you see on a T-72B3. They'll add on the armor slats near to the engine bay at the back. They'll add these little tiles here on the turret. Those are really just snapped on, like Legos nearly, and they're Contact 5 ERA tiles, which is an explosive reactive armor. They also add the Contact 5 ERA to the back of the turret, more armor slats on the back of the turret, and then also an additional layer on the upper glacis of the vehicle of more Contact 5 ERA, just pretty much placing it like a large flat slab. Once they do that, they say, okay, this tank is ready to go. And they would send them into Ukraine, and then they get destroyed usually within weeks. Then after that, the Russians started to run out of money even farther. And then the company started to say, well, we can't really make this thing into a T-72B3 because the Russian government doesn't have the money to even refurbish it to this standard. So what they started to do, and we saw this around 2023, is that they started to pump out these, which are T-72Bs. Basically, it's a T-72A. They go through the whole process like I just explained a second ago, but they used the much cheaper and far more available Contact 1 explosive reactive armor tiles, and they literally just cover the whole tank with it. Then they started to run out of money for that, and they also started to run out of T-72s in general. So then they said, okay, well, forget any armor modifications. We're just going to refit the engine, make sure all the electrical systems work, and everything else in between, and we'll just give the Russian army a T-72A. Then they ran out of T-72s. So then they started to move on to T-62s, or specifically the T-62M, which is the most common type that we've seen inside of Ukraine. It is this one right here. These have been around since really the 1960s, and so they started to refurbish these, giving them no upgrades hardly except for cope cages, and they would just refit the engine, check the electrical systems were working, and then they'd send it out to the front lines. And we see these a lot these days. These are incredibly common. But that's generally how it's been working, but now they don't even have these left. They don't have T-72s, they don't have T-62s, they really don't have any T-80s, and T-90s of any variety are a variant of a T-72. So they're largely running out of any available tanks. Same thing in the BMP category or the BTR category, which is their versions of armored personnel carriers. Those are also completely running out as well. And let me go show y'all, because someone also said, show us a Russian tank graveyard. And let me go show y'all what they kind of look like. They look like this. It's just fields like these in the hundreds. They just lay them out in the field and they rot out there for decades. So that's what they actually look like before they're refitted, and then they're refitted and repaired however much they can, and then they send them to Ukraine. And now most of these graveyards, like the ones you're seeing in the pictures right here, folks, if they took a picture from the exact same angles as we're seeing in these pictures right now, most of these pictures would be grassy fields. There's no tanks left hardly in most of these places.
And then when they're done getting the tanks out of here to refurbish, then they go and raid the museums and get those next after they get done with the junkyard tanks here. Honestly, it's wild to see this right here. It seems like Russia really doesn't have the ability to manufacture new tanks. All they can really do is refurbish, and that's about it, like you're saying. So once they run out of old hulks to refurbish, it's like, where do they go from there? Like, how do they start developing new tanks and manufacturing them if they really don't have that capability, because they simply don't have the materials nor the resources to do it right now?
Well, you know what's crazy is that they never will. They just don't have the ability to do it, and they never will have the ability to do it, because a lot of these main battle tanks, and this is the Achilles heel of every post-Soviet republic, is that the Soviet Union, when it existed, was a lot like the European Union in a way, and the states that you see today, like Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, Moldova, and all of the Stand Series countries, including Russia, they actually existed with those very same borders during the time of the Soviet Union, as Soviet republics, quote-unquote. All of these countries operated a lot like the European Union in the way that they had open borders, and there were literally no tariffs in transporting things across one Soviet republic's border to the next. This made it to where a lot of these republics became very specialized. Ukraine was specialized in high-end electronics productions. That included tanks, as well as agriculture. The Russian Federation, as it exists today as a Soviet republic, produced everyone's oil. That's pretty much all that they did. Then several other countries, like the Baltics, were generally focused on other sorts of technologies. Belarus was once again an agricultural state. And then Kazakhstan and other countries would mine rare earth metals and such other things that would be needed to be refined elsewhere in the Soviet Union and then produced to make these vehicles. No Soviet republic in the modern day has a complete end-to-end supply chain or a production chain that would be able to produce a main battle tank. So Russia has no ability at all right now to build a brand new main battle tank in any sort of a financially feasible way or in an economy of scale. They did make the T-14s, but those were retired due to extreme cost. Not only because the technology was pretty much unproven in every single way on a T-14 with the automated turret and such, but also due to the fact that because Russia generally had to import most of the parts from foreign countries, each T-14 Armada had a price tag of around $6 million US. To put it into perspective for all of y'all, an M1 Abrams can run anywhere in between $3.5 million to $5 million US, and that's also generally having most of it produced within the United States itself. The Russians couldn't even get the parts needed to make a T-14 Armata within their own borders, which for one, once the war in Ukraine started due to sanctions, it would be impossible to mass produce these. And second, because they didn't have the ability to mass produce these with an end-to-end production chain entirely inside of Russia, these things became exorbitantly expensive. So once they run out of graveyard tanks to refurbish, which is happening about right now, they don't have anything left to turn into a tank or an armored personnel carrier for that matter.
That's kind of wild, really, when you think about it. I wonder if Russia is looking into maybe producing externally in a third-party country, like perhaps getting North Korea to produce it and maybe having them armed or like maybe supplied with raw materials from China. Surely that's something they're thinking about, because if Russia can't do it domestically, then they have to branch out from there. So I wonder if they're recruiting a country out there to start developing these tanks, building them, and then shipping them all the way back to Russia after they're finished.
It's an interesting idea, but the problem with that, even more so, is that there's not really a lot of countries out there that produce main battle tanks. North Korea just came out with a brand new main battle tank, and let me go show y'all the brand new one, the North Korean MBT. This would be, I believe it is the Chonma 2. No, it's not that one. Let me go make sure to get y'all the correct one. I'll just show y'all a picture of it because I do not know the specific name of this tank, but this is the brand new main battle tank that North Korea has, which it actually is the Chonma 2. We don't really know a lot about this vehicle or how it was even really made for that matter, so there's a lot of mystery around this thing, and we also do not know whether North Korea has the ability to even mass produce this vehicle. Outside of that, North Korea has never been known to actually be able to produce its own tanks. They generally use something called the Chonma-ho, which is a funny name for one, and let me make sure to type this in as well. It's a
Was that
T-62.
Mr. Chan Ho on the pictures right there?
That was Ho Chi Minh for some reason. Like,
Oh,
it pulled up Ho
that's
Chi
not
Minh.
Chan Ho.
It pulled up Ho Chi Minh for some reason. I don't know why. But this is a Chonma-ho, which is just a T-62. They got these from Russia and from China during the Soviet Union's time, or really during the Cold War, and they've stayed around since then. So this is pretty much the entire tank force of North Korea, and outside of the brand new Chonma 2, we've never known of North Korea being able to produce their own main battle tanks, so they can't offshore, quote-unquote, tank production from Russia to North Korea, because North Korea doesn't appear to have any way to mass-produce main battle tanks. China would be the only country that could, but China does not produce, at least in the modern day any longer, any Soviet main battle tank variants. The last variant of main battle tank that China licensed produced was the T-62. And beyond that, China has been producing their own indigenous designs, and while they're very similar and have a Soviet design style behind them with the ammo carousels and the three-man crews and so on and so forth, they are still different in significantly technologically, and if the Russians wanted to quote-unquote offshore, for one, it would cost a good deal, and two, those tanks would be clearly Chinese, and at that point, that then would involve the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping, and whether or not they would want the West to know that they are publicly involved in any way in supplying and arming the Russian Federation. And while that's not even...
I don't know.
Hmm?
I don't know, man. I think they've kind of blown the lid on that already. We're seeing all kinds of Chinese like jet technology showing up for drones on the front lines. Like today, there was a picture that came out showing a Chinese-produced jet. I think it was a turbine jet that goes in the drones that Russia's using. That was found on the front lines. Also, there's allegations out there that somehow China's evading sanctions and also still buying Russian natural gas, even though it's sanctioned. To me, at this point, it seems pretty clear that China is involved in many different ways. So I'm not sure if they can really hide it anymore. It seems like it's pretty much an open secret.
It does appear like it's an open secret, I would agree. But the thing is that it is still not the equivalent of sending them, say, a ZTZ-99, which would be a huge step up from what we currently know that they're doing, because this would probably be the tank that China would send, a ZTC-99, or it could be a Type 96, which is the lighter and cheaper variant that generally is made for export, but these still fetch, from what I understand, a pretty decent price tag. And let me go see what the cost of a Type 96 is, and it would be roughly around $6 million. So if the Russians discontinued the T-14 Armada, if we're taking this at face value, folks, if the If the Russians discontinued the T-14 Armada due to cost reasons, which it was also around $5.5 to $6 million to make a T-14 Armada, they wouldn't even be able to get the lighter export variant Type 96 from China, because if they're paying for it at $6 million a pop, that's going to be financially unaffordable for the Russian Federation. As a matter of fact, that's way more expensive than refurbishing a main battle tank, which costs, usually from what we know, less than $1 million. So I don't really think they really can offshore at this point, because one, North Korea can't produce them, Iran can't produce them either. They have to count on buying them from other countries as well. So that leaves them only with China, and unless if China is willing to provide it as military aid for free to Russia, it's going to be entirely unaffordable for them on any massive scale.
Yeah, I just have no idea how they're going to fix it, honestly. Isn't it interesting, though, how so many of the unfixable crises are stacking up on Russia right now? They can't fix their vehicle production problem. That's becoming a new crisis. Literally today, we're hearing about that. And also, they're having a gas crisis they can't fix. It seems like Vladimir Putin's having a series of unfixable problems. And also, it doesn't seem like he's really making any effort to actually fix the problem in any way whatsoever. He's just kind of running with it and telling his people to either fix it or else. And I don't think it's going to work for much longer.
Yeah, I don't really think it is going to be working that much longer. And we even have been able to see that Russian state channels and propagandists are now openly talking, including, let me make sure, it is Shbivka or Skabiva, which we all know right here, has been talking today on state television on Russi'a 1 about how the imposed sanctions are actually going to be causing a significant blow to the Russian government's budget. So while Putin is saying that the sanctions are going to have no impact on Russia, even the state-sponsored propagandists inside the Russian Federation are now saying that this is going to have a severe impact on the Russian military, the Russian government, and their available budget to do anything, for that matter, inside of the country. So it's not looking too well, and it looks like even Russian propagandists being bankrolled by the Russian government are even seeing that that's definitely the case at this point. Even more
Hell,
so...
they're probably trying to spin it. That's probably the truth of it. They're probably realizing they can't ignore it forever. So they've decided, instead of totally ignoring it, they'll have the Russian propagandists come out and try to spin the story to where it doesn't sound really as bad as it truly is, in the hopes that maybe the Russian people will buy into it and not think that their country's doomed. But I just don't like it. I'll be very curious to know what the Russian people as a whole think about this right now, because surely, through all the brainwashing and all the propaganda statements that are out there on Russian television, surely they can realize that their economy is going down the toilet thanks to this war. And at what point, and I've been asking this question for ages, I'm like a broken record, but how long will it be until the Russian people finally have enough? Because there is a snapping point. There has to be a snapping point. So when are they finally going to say enough is enough and start rioting in the streets and basically wanting to oust Putin?
That's a good question. I honestly do not know when that would be. That would be a huge question to see answered one day, but it's just quite clear, folks. Russia is doomed in more ways than one at this point to an absolute failure and defeat in Ukraine. There's really no question at this point. The only question we have is whether or not they would be stupid enough to try and start a war with NATO in the despicable position that they find themselves in at the moment. But it doesn't appear that Russia is without its tricks. We did get to hear that the Japanese the Japanese air defense forces did scramble today to respond to a Russian bomber flying nearby, along with several Su-30s that were near to the area of the island of Hokkaido. The island of Hokkaido being the most northerly mainland island of Japan, right next to the Sakhalin Islands, which is controlled by the Russian Federation. We didn't get a lot of news or reports from that from Japan, but we did get that little bit of information that the Russian Federation did fly close enough to their air defense identification zone that aircraft were scrambled in response. In the meantime, Russia is also trying to find some way to be able to skirt the sanctions, at least for now, and maybe make a little bit of money if they can. And we were able to hear about that, actually, funnily enough, from the Ukrainians, at least first. According to what we've been able to hear, Zelensky has stated that the Russians are still trying to sell their oil to China, and China is trying to help facilitate that, at least to some degree. And Zelensky also stated that there was proof of that. And at the moment when this was published, we didn't have any proof for it just yet. But the proof then came out only 2 hours later. We did get an image showing two vessels anchored together, or pretty much moored together, in the Strait of Malacca off of Malaysia, and it appears to be the Russian carrier Perle, which is already sanctioned, and also a Hong Kong-linked tanker that had disabled tracking systems during the transfer. It appears that the two vessels are linked in actually transferring the contents of the Russian-sanctioned oil vessel to the Hong Kong-operated vessel, so that way it can then return back to China and drop off all of its oils inside the People's Republic of China through the territory of, or the special administrative region, technically, of Hong Kong. So it does appear that at least...
Also, that's an allegation, by the way. The ships are close to each other, and it looks like they could be transferring something, but we're not totally sure. But just to make that clear, though, it appears to be the case, but it's just an allegation.
And it does appear to be the case, and if this is the case, if we were to take this at face value and assume that this report is accurate, this may be an attempt by the People's Republic of China to skirt around the sanctions and to assist the Russian Federation financially by still taking receipt of the oil and giving them under-the-table payments, if this is actually the case. It does appear that there would be a significant financial incentive both for the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation to conduct these actions, but conducting seaborne ship-to-ship transfers of cargo, like is being alleged here, is actually a fairly difficult operation and has to be done in fair weather, in fair seas. It cannot be done in any other perilous weather states or sea states within the area, and not only that, it is a somewhat lengthy process and one that can go wrong in a multitude of ways. So, generally, this doesn't appear to be replacing, at least the purchase orders that China had officially with the Russian Federation, but it may be an attempt to try and keep at least some sort of connection there to the Russian oil markets by the People's Republic of China, if that is the case and if that is what's actually happening. But moving on out of Europe and generally the dire Russian situation that we're seeing at the moment, we're actually going to be moving over to the Americas because we've also been able to get some incredibly significant news out of the Caribbean today, or more so really out of the Eastern Mediterranean, at least at its origin point today. And that would be the USS Gerald R Ford Carrier Strike Group. The USS Gerald R Ford is the newest Ford-class aircraft carrier in the U.S. Navy. And let me go show you all a picture of it right here. This is the Gerald R Ford. It is pretty much a successor to the Nimitz-class supercarriers that the United States Navy has been operating for decades. And it does appear that the Russian... Well, actually, really quickly, folks, I'm sorry for being off track. I'm trying to balance a million things in my head. We actually have a poll to answer. Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we do have a poll on that topic we were just discussing there about that Chinese vessel and the Russian vessel. So we did see that a Chinese vessel is accused of receiving LNG, natural gas, from a sanctioned Russian vessel. And what is going on? This poll is pretty much unanimous. Pretty much everybody said, 90%, that it sounds like sanctions evasion. So if it is true, and it is proven that there was a transfer of liquid natural gas from the Chinese vessel to the Russian vessel, then I would say, obviously, it seems like sanctions evasion. So that might be a widespread strategy that China is going to start using to get natural gas without basically getting hit by more sanctions. So it's hard to tell if it's a one-off incident or if it's even true whatsoever. It's kind of hard to tell right now, but it could be indicative of a larger strategy that China is going to start using to get around the sanctions. It seems like certainly the case, and 90% agree with that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would generally be with the 90% as well. It does appear, at least on the face of it, that it would be some form of a sanctions evasion that is being conducted between China and Russia at the moment. Considering that the story seems highly plausible, it might be the case. However, these sorts of actions cannot be conducted at any massive scale and pretty much completely replace the shipments that were being conducted officially between Russia and China of crude oil. So I would have to generally say that the chances are quite low that Russia will remain unfazed even if this type of sanctions evasion is beginning to be conducted. The amount of oil that Russia will be able to export to China will significantly decrease if this is the new path of action that the two of the countries are taking at the moment. But still, it will allow the Russians to try and at least curb around the sanctions a little bit at the moment. But moving on out of that and into the news that we have inside of the Eastern Caribbean and getting back to the story on the Gerald R Ford, the USS Gerald R Ford is the successor to the Nimitz-class aircraft carriers that many people have come to love and know here in the United States of America. The Gerald R Ford is generally operationally very similar, at least in its seafaring capabilities, to the Nimitz class. As a matter of fact, its hull profile is almost identical to that of a Nimitz class carrier in almost every way. The superstructure, however, has had some significant changes, and outside of the actual vessel itself and its hull shape or hull design, the electronics, avionics, radars, and sensor systems of the vessel have been heavily upgraded. And there, I believe, if I remember correctly, has been some additional air defense added on board to the Gerald R Ford classes, at least in their first iteration, the USS Gerald R Ford. This aircraft carrier, for this reason, generally is the flagship of the entire United States Navy, considering that it is the most advanced and cutting-edge aircraft carrier in the entirety of the Navy. And we have been able to hear that as of today, the Secretary of Defense has ordered the USS Gerald R Ford Carrier Strike Group, currently operating within the Eastern Mediterranean, to set sail immediately to the area of the Caribbean, where it will then join U.S. Southcom's area of responsibility under the command of Admiral Halsey at U.S. Southcom headquarters in Miami, Florida, to join in operations against the Maduro regime, and I'm supposing at this point also against Colombia as well. This is a fairly large move, because not only is it the aircraft carrier, the Gerald R Ford, but the Gerald R Ford does come with a strike group of its own. Usually these strike groups are comprised of about 4 other vessels, or at least surface vessels, and a nuclear attack submarine that generally is never publicly spoken of, or even accounted for in public records of the carrier strike groups. But generally, from what I know, based off of the last reports we got about the Gerald R Ford, I believe it is accompanied by 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers at the moment, with no guided missile cruisers following it along for its voyage. If we look at the current force dispositions inside of the Caribbean, this actually means that not only is this aircraft carrier going to be heavily augmenting the amount of available air power in the area, adding an additional 80 aircraft to U.S. Southcom's area of responsibility and command in the Eastern Caribbean, which is tectonic in size, but it also will be adding an additional 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in the area, increasing the amount of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers that are present within this area of responsibility by 100%. Now we will have, once the Gerald R Ford arrives, 8 Arleigh Burkes, 1 Ticonderoga class, at least 2 nuclear-powered fast attack submarines, an entire aircraft carrier with about 80 aircraft on board, the USS Iwo Jima, along with its amphibious ready group, the 22nd MEU, supported by the 2 amphibious support vessels, I believe, which is the USS San Antonio and the USS Fort Lauderdale, and all of the rotary aircraft and the VTOL aircraft that are on board the USS Iwo Jima. In short, it's practically an invasion force at this point in size once the Gerald R Ford arrives. The Gerald R Ford is expected to arrive within the area of Southcom's AOR, or Area of Responsibility, at least by the 1st of November, which is giving us a tentative timetable at this point that any sort of offensive actions against Venezuela on land will most likely be conducted after the 1st of November. I would actually ballpark it somewhere in between November 3rd to November 11th. That's generally what I would assume at the moment, considering that after the aircraft carrier gets in area, it will have to communicate with its command, which will be U.S. Southcom at that point, and U.S. Second Fleet, and then we'll also have to coordinate with the naval assets in the area, make sure that everything's up to speed on the war plan, everything is coordinated and calibrated properly as far as the attack patterns and plans that are going to be conducted, and then it'll all be executed on the same time at the same day at some point in the future after it arrives around the 1st of November. So with that in mind, a lot of people have been talking about the arrival of Armageddon, in a sense, which is the Gerald R Ford, and what this means for Southcom, and also not only that, the Caribbean as a whole. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so this is a huge, huge move. This carrier strike group is coming all the way from the Mediterranean and heading all the way over to this area right here, right near Venezuela. And that is indicating that something massive is about to happen, at least in my personal opinion. So analysts are now saying today that this major U.S. military buildup near Venezuela is far greater than what's needed even for land strikes inside of Venezuela. So what are your thoughts? About 57% said they agree with that and something larger is coming very soon, while 18% said it's all a huge bluff, and 15% said I disagree and it's simply for land strikes, and people are getting a little bit carried away. So I would say personally, I think something much, much larger is coming. When I heard the news today that this carrier strike group was heading to Venezuela, I immediately thought they are planning on either invading Venezuela or they're planning on expanding their strikes into Colombia and Venezuela, and they could do a dual attack on both countries at the same time. It's going to be something much larger than merely land strikes. I agree with the other analysts. I believe that there is something much, much larger coming, and I'm hoping the U.S. doesn't go overboard here because, like I mentioned before, Russia made that mistake with Ukraine. They decided to go invade a country which did not need invading, and also they had no right to invade, and then they got bogged down there, and now it's absolutely eviscerating the Russian economy. And I hope the U.S. is not about to do the same thing in the northern part of South America. So something's going to happen, and we're about to find out in about 7 to 8 days, or maybe a little bit beyond that. We're about to find out what this is. But right now, the rhetoric against Colombia and Venezuela is being ramped up through the roof by U.S. officials. So, best guess right now, something huge is about to happen. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to go with the 58%. Something significant is coming around for sure in the Eastern Caribbean at this point. With the Gerald R Ford moving into the area, this is massively changing the situation that we're seeing there right now. Let me go and get y'all one of the maps that I would have with the force dispositions on it. Let me go get that so that way we can show y'all what this looked like the last time we saw this. And I should have a force disposition somewhere around here. Let me see here. Let's see. Here we are. Here's the force disposition. So this is everything that's within theater right now. So right now in the region, we have about roughly 16 operational multi-role aircraft, including the 6 Harriers on board the Iwo Jima, and also the 10 F-35Bs that are at Roosevelt Roads at the moment. So only 16. So when the USS Gerald R Ford shows up, it's adding an additional 80 aircraft in theater. And that's actually mostly multi-role aircraft. That would be around 60 or so extra multi-role aircraft, and then AWACS, and so on and so forth, the additional aircraft that are also on the carrier as well. So it is going to be massively adding to the amount of available forces, or at least air forces within the area. Not only that, it's going to be followed by a couple of Arleigh Burkes. I actually saw someone in the chat correct me, and I'm going to take that at face value for the moment, that there's only 2 Arleigh Burkes with the Gerald R Ford, which I have to say is a wildly light escort for the most advanced carrier in the U.S. Navy currently, if that is the case, but that still will be adding an additional 2 Arleigh Burkes, or generally increasing the destroyer force within the area of responsibility by 50%. So this is going to be a major addition to the forces that are present within the area, and not only that, it's going to bring to bear an additional 64 Tomahawks that will be spread out amongst the 2 additional Arleigh Burkes which will be arriving here. So generally, I would have to say something is going to happen at this point. We do not move the most advanced carrier in the U.S. Navy into this area when we're already conducting strikes against vessels practically on the daily at this point to conduct a show of force. This is guaranteed going to be something that's going to go down at this point. I see a lot of people talking about all of the different opinions that people are having on this situation at the moment. And I've got to be honest with y'all, I don't really get it. And I've seen someone say in the chat a second ago, we are trying to stop the millions of deaths of Americans at the hands of the cartel. But just taking a step back for a moment, because, I'm not really one for the whole political rhetoric side of things, and we don't do that here on the channel. How does this really make sense if that's what we're actually doing? This is kind of like just to put this out there, this is a lot like how back in the day there was supposed to be this green act that cost $19 trillion, and nobody could ever explain how that was ever going to be afforded by the U.S. government, $19 trillion. This is something similar to that. In how in the world is this ever going to deal with the cartels, dealing with one country that has cartels in it? The cartels are in literally every single country in Central and South America. So we're going to go into Venezuela and we're going to bomb the shit out of them, literally, and maybe get some of the cartel operatives, but every other part of the cartels that exist throughout Colombia and the rest of Central America, they're all going to be intact and untouched. And then once we stop bombing Venezuela, they're just going to reappear there, or they're going to just start growing their operations out back in Venezuela again. So how in the world is this actually fixing this? Like, this is what I'm not understanding here, because we've been going off of the foreign policy prerogative up till this point, because this premise has made so little sense. We've said that this has to be something that they're justifying this to the public over. This couldn't be the actual reason reason we're there. So we had chalked it up for weeks now, really months, that we're actually going down there to deal with the growing Chinese influence in Venezuela because we're trying to be containist or create a containment on the Chinese and their expansion of a sphere of influence, which makes way more sense to conduct this kind of an action than it would be to fight the cartels. Fighting the cartels in a conventional sense like this makes literally no sense. It does not. I just gotta say, the people who right now are saying that this is a good idea to do this in Venezuela were the same people who said that we have been in Afghanistan for too long because you can't fight the Taliban because they're an asymmetrical force that doesn't fight conventionally and they blend in with the populace when they're not actively shooting at you, which is the truth. There really is no way for a conventional force to fight an asymmetrical force, like even the cartels. I've stated that there is a much greater alternative to this because I would have to say that fighting the cartels, or at least fighting the flow of drugs into the country, is a commendable goal. I will have to say that. But at the same time, this is certainly not the way to go around that. The best way to go around it would just be strengthen border security on our land border with Mexico and just give a lot more funding to the Coast Guard so that way they can expand the Coast Guard and conduct even more patrols inside the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific to stop the flow of drugs as much as we possibly can. Because doing it this way, it's going to cost a whole load of money, it may cost us lives, and it's not going to actually change the situation down there at all. It's going to be the same situation we're dealing with right now if this is actually what we're doing it for. It would be a lot better just to control what we can, which is the waters around the coast of the United States and our direct border itself, to stop the flow of drugs that way. Because I will say this, folks, here on the channel, whenever someone in office has an idea, whether or not that is an idea that you like or not, I always try and come up with a way to make it actually work. If we want to stop the flow of drugs in the country, I gotta say, not a bad idea, but this is sure as hell not the way to go around it and actually have anything come of it. Because I'll ask this right now, out of all of the boats that we've blown up around Venezuela, has it empirically, by actual evidence, slowed down any flow of drugs into the United States? And I'm pretty certain that the answer on that would be no, or the impact has been largely minimal. So that clearly is not the case. And if we increase these actions, we're going to be putting a heavy investment into a minimal gain. So if we want to get a maximum gain for our investment in dealing with the situation, just strengthening the border, so giving more funding to the border patrols on land to be able to interdict anyone who's illegally crossing the border, because that's usually how the drugs would cross, and to also increase the amount of inspections at border checkpoints would certainly be a way to go, as well as funding the Coast Guard to increase the amount of patrols or to give them a more advanced technologies to cover a wider area and to be able to interdict any such illegal narco activities that are trying to reach our shores. That generally seems to me like the smarter approach to this, if this is the actual foreign policy prerogative that we're going on at the moment, and while we're moving all of these forces into the Caribbean to try and deal with the situation. But beyond that, a lot of people in the chat have actually been talking about this very topic and how in the world the United States should deal with narco-terrorism. What would be the best approach to cut down the amount of drugs flowing into the United States? Would it be the approach that I'm saying, just increase border security and tighten up control of the borders so that way we can stop the flow that way, or to directly conduct some form of an armed attack on Venezuela in hopes that that will stop it? And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like about 52% of the audience said that protect and tightening the U.S. borders is the best way to deal with the narco-terrorism that's originating in South America and flowing into the United States, while 27% said invading and attacking Venezuela is the best way actually to handle it, and only 11% said diplomacy, sanctions, etc. is the best way forward. So I will say this, diplomacy with Venezuela is not going to get us anywhere. I can tell you that right now. I don't think that's going to be very fruitful because the guy that's in charge of Venezuela is a thug. So that's not going to get anywhere. So also sanctions is useless because we really don't trade with Venezuela. So also useless as well. So I would say personally, I believe the burden is on the United States to deal with this. So we should probably protect and tighten our U.S. borders more closely, which I believe we're already doing to stop the flow of drugs into the country. I don't think going and invading foreign countries is the best way to deal with it. Maybe as a last resort, it would be the best way to deal with it. But I just don't see starting a major invasion of Venezuela simply over drugs. That seems to be a little bit overkill. Now, I can understand invading Venezuela for other reasons. Like, for example, if China was setting up bases in Venezuela or also sending their troops there or extracting tons and tons of oil from Venezuela, I could possibly see maybe some justification for invasion or attacks then. But we're not getting that official narrative from the U.S. administration. What we're getting from the U.S. administration is they're saying it's all about drugs. And I just don't really understand why drugs would be a reason to invade Venezuela, considering there are so many other countries in South America that are also involved heavily in the drug trade. So I just don't get it personally. I'm with the 52%. I think the U.S. borders is where the issue should really be fixed and not necessarily with an invasion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that diplomacy, I would agree with Matthew on that, has really no way of moving forward. There's no way to move forward with the Venezuelans on diplomacy, in my honest opinion. Now, on the other hand, what we're claiming is the actual reason that we're going to go to war with Venezuela for the large part, which is the cartels. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, I just do not understand it. Now, however, I will say this, folks. If the administration came out tomorrow and said, we lied, the reason why we're going to Venezuela is because we're going to curb stomp them because they are pretty much aligned with the Chinese, and we're not going to have that Chinese shit here in the Americas. I would be all for this, actually, overnight. I would say, okay, now this makes sense, because curbing Chinese influence in Central and South America is a huge U.S. strategic prerogative, but that's not what we're saying this is for. We're actually saying that this is for curbing the cartels, and that is something that I just do not understand. I do not get how in the world we're even going to work around that, because like we've been saying, the cartel doesn't just exist in Venezuela. This isn't like, a company like, UPS or something like that, where it has like a specific headquarters and then distribution points and it's all legally filed. I mean, this is an international cartel. It exists in multiple countries. So it doesn't really make any sense at all to say we're going to invade Venezuela and this is going to fix the problem. Because folks, what's crazy about this is where in the world did the drugs actually come into the United States at our borders? Across the land border with Mexico, or by sea through the Gulf of Mexico or the Pacific. So clearly, Venezuela is about 1,000 miles away, and all these drugs aren't crossing from Venezuela over the land border into America via Venezuela. It's through Mexico, which once again proves the point, just in the fact of that alone, that the drugs are coming from a cartel that is multiple nation spanning. It's international. So invading Venezuela isn't going to save a single American life in the United States by depriving them of access to any form of narcotics. The narcotics are still going to flow in a significant degree. So how in the world do we actually stop this? And we stop it at the point that we directly control it, at the border. If the drugs are crossing over our border by sea or by land, that is the place where the drugs are stopped. Increase border inspections, increase border patrol personnel, and also surveillance and technology equipment at the border, and increase the funding to the Coast Guard. That is easily how you deal with this. It doesn't take an entire war and an endless crusade through the entirety of the Americas to try and deal with this problem. And the truth to be told, we're never going to fix the problem, because I'll tell y'all why. These countries are poor as shit. Venezuela is a great case in point of that, as well as Colombia. So we invade them, we kill off everyone, if we can even, which would not happen. We kill off everyone who's involved in the cartel, and then we leave. And because they're still dirt-ass poor, and everyone wants to try and get ahead, they're going to just create a brand new cartel. Just like Al-Qaeda fell apart and created brand new splinter cells of Al-Qaeda, or how the Taliban got put under and then they came right back when the U.S. was leaving, so on and so forth. This is an asymmetrical group, and on top of that, they're going to continue to rise up no matter what. Even after we leave, a new cartel will just take the place of the old one.
Yeah. Yeah, and also it's like, I'm not trying to, and also please don't take this political, folks, but Mexico is literally right on our border, and Mexico has cartels galore operating in their country. Like, there are cartels everywhere that manufacture, distribute, etc., all these different drugs, and they're literally right on our border. So they're a lot closer than Venezuela is. And also, to my knowledge, I'm not a cartel expert, but I believe there are more potent cartels in Mexico than there are in Venezuela. So if we're going to try to justify invading somebody, and once again, I'm not saying to invade Mexico, I want to make that clear off the bat, but if the U.S. is going to use the same logic, why wouldn't they invade Mexico over Venezuela if they're going to use that logic? At the same time, though, you don't see them saying they're going to invade Mexico. Like, why is that? Why is that the case?
That's a good question. And also to put this out there to y'all, Mexico nowadays is not the Mexico of a decade and a half ago. Mexico today is semi-wealthy, actually. It's starting to move on up in the world. Everything south of Mexico is dirt poor. And Colombia is also another major hub of cartels. I mean, some of the most famous names involved in cartels and the drug trades have come out of Colombia, and still to this day, they do. So if we were going to fight the cartels, wouldn't the number one and number two targets be Mexico and Colombia, just due to the fact that they have the largest, most organized, and also most powerful cartels within the Americas? I mean, Venezuela is like a backwater operator of cartels if you look at them from a power perspective. I mean, hell, that's like saying we want to make sure to win FIFA. So what we're going to go do is that we're going to go beat the shit out of Ireland's football team, and that'll definitely help us to win the gold in FIFA. That doesn't even make any sense. I don't even know if that's a good comparison because I don't know a damn thing about soccer. But beyond that, that would be like here's a good equivalent to this. Here's a good equivalent. We want to show the world that we're incredibly wealthy, and there's this $100 thing that we can buy to show the whole world that they're wealthy, or there's this $10 thing that we can buy. So we're going to get the $10 thing, and that'll definitely show everyone that we're a big spender. And that doesn't even make any sense, because everyone will obviously say, well, if you're a big spender, why don't you just buy the $100 thing right beside the $10 item? Why'd you go for the $10 item? It's not even, it's nowhere close to being $100 worth, or even a similar value. That's what everyone would say. This is the same thing. Venezuela isn't even known for most of their cartels. Like, their cartels are literally like little minor league players in the cartel sphere.
I would say so. And also at this point, I would say I'm pretty confident in saying that Maduro's time span that he currently has left in office is really coming to a close rapidly. I don't see any circumstance where Maduro is left in charge of Venezuela. He has a very limited amount of time left as the leader of Venezuela. The U.S. is definitely going to oust him. I think that's pretty clear right now. The method of ousting is not clear. That's the part that's not very certain right now. But they are going to oust Maduro. But who are they going to replace Maduro with after the fact? Are we going to try to install some type of democracy inside of Venezuela and put a pro-democratic leader there? Well, I'm not sure. Like that, there's so many things. Like we can't even get past ground one or ground zero with how this is actually going to work with an invasion. But if you move on beyond that and look at step 2 and 3, it's like who are we going to install there in Venezuela? And also, do we really expect that's going to work? It's like I don't think it's going to work that well.
I don't think it's going to work well at all. Like, I just don't really see a way that this is going to turn out well. If anyone in the current administration is listening, let's take a step back. Let's rethink this whole thing, because if we're trying to actually stop the flow of drugs, and that's what we're actually going with, great idea. I'd agree. Not a bad idea, but this is a completely wrong way of going around it. We ought to go and just strengthen the Coast Guard and the Border Patrol and increase the amount of inspections and increase the amount of surveillance in those areas. That will easily fix the problem and greatly decrease the amount of drugs that will get through. There will still be some drugs to get through, but it'd be far better than what we're about to do right now. Because think about this, folks. Think about it this way. So we bomb the hell out of Venezuela. We kill everyone in the cartels in Venezuela. And yet the boats that are still sailing from Mexico straight through the Gulf, and the boats that are sailing straight into California through the Pacific, and all the people who are still driving across the border with the drugs hidden inside their cars, they're still driving and sailing into America every single day. That doesn't decrease. The only thing that decreases is the amount of cartel members that happen to be living in Venezuela during that period of time, and it impacts generally nothing else on the cartel logistics chain. And also another thing that I have to say really quickly before we move on from this. Someone brought up what sounds like a really good point, and they said, well, it's not to go and overthrow the government down there, and just do that and end it there. It's to make removing the cartels the priority of a new government. But here's the problem with that. The cartels are so powerful in these countries, they pretty much are a lot like Hezbollah in Lebanon, where they're pretty much the government of Lebanon without officially being the government. These people kind of live at the mercy of the cartels. If a leader in Venezuela came up in an interim government that we created there and said, we are going to have every single cartel member's head on a platter in this country within 3 years, their car is going to get blown up leaving that building, or they're going to get shot after they leave that building and killed outright. And they're also going to go and kill their family as well. And when you're under that kind of threat, it sounds like an easy thing. Oh, well, they're going to have to do that anyways. But if you were that person in Venezuela that just got put in charge of the interim government, and you were told to make that statement, and you already knew, and you already been told by the cartel that if you make that statement and try and follow through with that, you're going to be dead before the end of the day, and also your entire family, your wife, kids, and everyone else is also going to be dead as well, you would have a lot of pressure on you, and you go, I don't know if I'm really up for the job here. I don't really know if I'm up to snuff. And everyone's going to say that. Everyone's going to say that they're not up to snuff in those countries, and there's just no real way to deal with that. There's no way to even make them deal with it. It's the best way to say it, at least for now. It's just an unfixable situation, and that's why I'm saying we don't need to get involved down in Venezuela right now. We just need to strengthen our borders and strengthen the Coast Guard, and that generally will fix most of the problem for us without us having to go through this wild goose chase and then end up worse for wear or none the better by the end of the whole thing. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And before we move on into the rest of the news that we've gotten out of the Caribbean today, because there was still a load, folks, that we've got to get through and talk about, I do want to make sure that we get to a couple of questions, because we have had a load of folks here tonight, and also a ton of super chats, crazily enough, in the first hour. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so let's jump into our first 3 super chat questions of the night. And our first one here goes to Bobby, also known as LC39A. And he throws in an extremely generous $150 support, and that is the largest super chat of the night. And thank you very much, Bobby, for supporting us yet again here on the channel and helping to keep us running. Bobby is bankrolling this operation, and we do appreciate it. And Bobby said, hello.
And hello there, and I hope you're doing well tonight, Bobby43. And I gotta thank you for the unbelievably massive support and helping this channel to keep on running, because your support helps us to say hello to all of y'all every single night. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again for being a legend of the LSA.
Indeed, a legend indeed. And our second super chat here goes to Barry Watson, and he throws in a very generous $100 super chat.
Dang!
And thank you very much, Barry, for that support as well. And we do appreciate that. He said, from Sicily to Ukraine, search Forte 10 on flight 24. And also, people love that. When that Forte 10 is flying around all the time right there, I think it's a Global Hawk that flies the border with Belarus, I believe. That thing's always flying around sometimes, but I love to watch it. Every time it pops up, it's like old nostalgia. I like watching that plane too.
Let's see here. So let me go and look at that Forte 10. Forte. Oh, look at that. Wow. Where is it? How do we get to it? Show it on the map. Yeah, there we are. Oh, look. There it is. It's in the Black Sea. Yeah, that is I believe Global Hawk. We've seen that actually on that orbit a lot of times. It's just that I've never seen it on Flight Radar 24. But that is really cool though, and really neat to see it. And the Global Hawks are a really cool reconnaissance drone. This is what they actually look like right here. I love the design of this thing. It's probably the coolest looking high altitude reconnaissance drone that exists in the whole world.
It's so beefy. Like, you gotta admit, this is a beefy looking design. This design was so good, North Korea had to get plywood out of the shed and smack one together, a fake one that is, a rip-off version, because they loved it so much. But I doubt it has the same capabilities, but it looks very similar.
Man, the North Korean Global Hawk.
Look at that. It's a little less sleek. It's a little bit more bulbous, but, you know, it's got the same, well, ours doesn't really like spew out pollution quite like that, but they made an effort.
They tried, and failed, but they still tried, and I guess we could give that to them. Also, by the way, I believe theirs actually has the capability of carrying an air-to-ground missile, so it's not really a reconnaissance drone, it's more like a ground attack drone in a way. I don't know how that works, and I have a feeling that will be lost really quickly if they tried that. And also, I just got to be honest with y'all, when you look at this thing from the side, this is like a Global Hawk if it had no chin line. Like, look at that hump at the front. No chin line at all.
It's like a Global Hawk if you said, it's like if you gave a designer like Microsoft Paint or something and said, copy the Global Hawk, I want the same thing in North Korea, get it done. And then they got on Microsoft Paint and they tried their best, but they didn't really have good measuring tools and stuff like that. So this is the best thing they had right here was this.
Man, I'm not going to lie, it's not an improvement at all. It's not an improvement. Here's another picture they have of it. I just got to tell you, like, this one is so much better looking than this one. It's just the little details that make the difference. But this one looks like it's unfinished. And also this original paint job that they had it in, which looks like it came out of like an algae covered shithole. Like, I don't know why they gave it that paint job. They're like, yeah, let's give it that algae covered darkish green and that darkish blue. That'll really make it look like a proper drone. And then they eventually painted it gray because I guess they all realized that looked ugly and it didn't even look modern. So then they painted it in this gray, but that doesn't even look that good because ours is chromed up. It's got a chrome dome on the top of the actual sensor equipment at the front. That's cool looking. This isn't.
Yeah, it does look pretty cool like that. Also, I agree with Mason Miami. I wondered this myself because for North Korea to have an autonomous drone like we have with the Global Hawk, I'm with Mason. I think there's actually a pilot inside this thing. I think they're hiding a pilot, and I don't think this thing's actually remote controlled. I think there might be a pilot inside of that, and they're pretending like it's a UAV, but I don't think it is. Like I have some serious doubts about that.
Wouldn't that be crazy, man? And he has to fly the thing through that little camera at the front.
Yeah, it's like the Mechanical Turk, but it's like a drone.
Bro, you finally learned about the Mechanical Turk?
I've known about the Mechanical Turk.
Yo, he knows about the Mechanical Turk? Oh, man, I gotta say, that is incredible. But still, with that, folks, I hope that does address that the best we can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing running. And so with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
All right, and this one is going to go to Peace with War, who put in a $100 support as well. And thank you very much, Peace with War, for that support also. And they said, hi, enforcers, and hello there. They said, will the armed actions in Venezuela be the start of a war with cartels in other countries in Central and South America?
That is a good question. And let me make sure to grab your super chat specifically, Peace with War, so that way I can read it a little bit more and get a better understanding of the question. Will the armed actions in Venezuela... I would say it might be because there really is no way to deal with the cartels with the military action that we're suggesting. And I know that for really, like, I got to say this because this is what we always deal with and what we're always going up against here on the channel. But very political people from one end to the other, they don't want to hear really the truth. They just want to hear what they want to believe is the truth. So a lot of people really get pissed off when we say that this just isn't the way to deal with it. Because we're saying that they're almighty, great leader. This is, by the way, this is what we dealt with in the last presidency with Biden whenever we disagree with anything he did. But their almighty great leader, so on and so forth, is never wrong, and he's always right. He knows more than anyone in the world, so you're just stupid and ignorant, enforcer. You don't know what you're talking about. But this doesn't make any sense. Attacking Venezuela doesn't deal with all of the cartels. It only deals with a small few, and small ones at that. This is like the small fry business. So unless we're willing to go and deal with every single cartel in every single South and Central American country, which ends up becoming its own wars in their own rights, separately, there is no way to deal with this in the way that's being suggested at the moment. So I have absolutely no clue if this is just going to be the opening of a great crusade of a sort that we're going to pull off, traveling through all of Central America, because it just doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense at all. And of course, here was what we usually get. Like, look at this. I sit there and say this makes no sense. Someone says, let's see, enforcer gets kickbacks from the cartels. Like that's the kind of stuff you go up against. You sit there and you point out common sense. Like, the cartels also exist in Mexico, Guatemala, Panama, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Honduras, Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru, as well as Venezuela. So invading Venezuela doesn't make any sense because there's about 13 or 14 other countries with entirely intact cartels, which are still operating at that point. And then you sit there and you get crap like that. I wish folks, for once, I really just wish for once and for all, people weren't so dead set on politicism and political rhetoric, because we dealt with this stuff in the last administration a lot as well. Whenever stuff they would do didn't make any sense, and we would say it didn't make any sense. And then people want to sit there and immediately say, oh, and then a straw man, and then say that you're for something that you're not. There's a different way to deal with this, which is just strengthening the borders. That makes 100% sense. Like, how in the world does that not make sense? If the drugs are crossing our borders into the United States, and invading a country like this sure as hell isn't going to fix the problem, wouldn't the alternative that would make a lot of sense be to just strengthen the borders farther? Wouldn't that make sense? That makes sense. Like, that makes sense. There's really no other way to go about this thing rather than that. But that's
I
what
wonder
I
if
would
the
say.
cartels have actually ever sponsored a YouTube channel before. Obviously, we would never want that. Just out of curiosity's sake, I wonder if they've ever done that because the cartels are almost a quasi government in their own right in these like Mexico, South America, et cetera, like that. So they have a lot of money to toss around. So I wonder if they've ever like gotten into like the psyop space. You know how countries will like go out and do psyop campaigns and they'll have people go around and try to like do pro propaganda for the group. I wonder if they've ever done that. That would be wild to find that out.
Yeah, that would be interesting. That would be interesting to know. But still, I saw someone say you were too logical. Maybe we are because like we always say, I don't find anyone's policies to be bad policies. It's just how they're implemented that makes a bad policy. Like I will say this: I agree 100% with the president's idea that the flow of drugs into this country should be greatly decreased. I would agree. But where I disagree is with the idea that we should start going around invading countries in South America and Central America one at a time, like that ever would make sense and actually fix the problem. That's where I have a disconnect here, because that side of things doesn't make any sense at all. Now, if you want to tell me how many millions of lives this is going to save, explain to me how this stops people from driving across the Mexican-American border into the United States with tons of fentanyl-laced cocaine sitting in the side fenders of their cars. Tell me how that invading Venezuela stops that from happening on the Mexican-American border, and I will give up. But there is no way in hell that invading Venezuela stops that from happening. There's no way you can even connect the two to make that make sense. Or, for that matter, how blowing up Venezuela is going to stop a boat from sailing up into the bayou in Louisiana and dropping off a ton of coke to some Cajun down there in the bayou who's then going to distribute it from there. There's no way to explain that in any way that would make sense, and how bombing Venezuela is going to decrease either of those two actions across the border or by sea. Does not. So that's why I'm saying I have an issue with this, because if that's what we're really doing this for, this just doesn't make sense. Like, the approach from this does not make any sense at all. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. And also, I see some people saying it's about the oil. It's certainly not about the oil. Venezuelan oil is so bad off in quality, we wouldn't want it. Like, I can promise you that. We have oil of much higher quality and a lot of deposits that we still haven't tapped yet in America that would be a lot easier and a lot more profitable to tap than going in and invading Venezuela to get access to their high sulfur crappy oil. Like, we just don't want to touch that stuff. That's why no one's touched it yet. Like, in fiction, their oil is like amazing and it's magic. It's going to create like a South American superpower. But the reality of it is that it's just laced with sulfur. And to refine that stuff into any usable fuel grade, it's going to take an extreme amount of money to build a refinery that's capable of even doing that. And also extracting it's going to be a bitch as well because it's filled with sulfur. So generally, no one wants to deal with that. That's why no one's really tapped into it even now. But anyways, with that, I hope that has addressed it the best I can. Peace with war. I generally wouldn't know, but that's really the only way we could deal with it. So I suppose that at some point, I guess it just leads to a chain of wars against all the cartels in South America, and I still don't know how that would fix the problem anyways. But with that, I hope that does address that the best that we can. A big thanks to you so much once again for the massive support and help of this channel to keep on running. And with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news for the night. We still have a lot of news in the Caribbean and a lot of news from inside of Ukraine and a little bit in Europe. But moving us on into the Caribbean, we have been able to see that the United States of America is now deploying ISRs into Puerto Rico, from what we've been able to hear, according to Aviation Week. That includes the Ares, Artemis, and Athena platforms, which have been retasked for operations in the U.S. Southcom region. In the meantime, we've also been able to hear that another drug boat was hit and destroyed in the Caribbean today, the clip being shown right here. This is the boat, and this is the strike.
Oh wow, look at that. I would love to know. I wish they would add in these posts that they make right here about what munition was used. That looked like a pretty large missile.
Yeah, that really was. We also were able to hear that 6 individuals were killed in this strike, apparently, which is something interesting to note. But moving on from that, we also were able to see that Colombia is now catching strays as well. The United States has now declared sanctions on the president of Colombia and his wife in response to their refusal to cooperate in the fight against drug trafficking. And we've also been able to hear that apparently the president of the United States stated Colombia is a drug den. A thug is the leader of that country. They make cocaine at levels that we've never seen before, and they sell it back into this. We're not going to put up with it much longer. So generally throwing in Colombia in the same boat as Venezuela at this point, which now makes us wonder if this is going to be some sort of a joint action by the United States against Venezuela and Colombia simultaneously. We have also been able to hear inside of Venezuela today that the President of the United States is considering plans to target cocaine facilities inside of the country, and we've also heard in Caracas several more government statements inside of Venezuela. The Venezuelan Defense Minister, Vladimir Pedrino, declared that the armed forces will not allow a government kneeling to U.S. interests, saying on state TV, "Interpret it however you want, never slaves again, we are a free country." A fairly interesting statement. Moving on from that, we also were able to hear that Maduro also stated today, this one is laughable because this is just a straight up lie. Maduro said that Venezuela is 100% free of drug production, accusing foreign powers of spreading a criminal and false narrative after failing to accuse us of weapons of mass destruction. Now, that one is actually stupid because we do know that there are cartels operational in Venezuela. That's just delusional land to say otherwise. So that was a hilarious one. So while we're saying that we're going to go in there and fight the cartels, which makes no sense, Maduro is saying that there's literally no cartels in all of Venezuela, which is a flat-out lie as well. We also were able to see that Maduro made some funny statements on national TV today, apparently reading them right off of his iPhone. I can't show y'all the clip because it's probably copyrighted, but I can tell y'all what Maduro said on national TV. Not war, not war, not war. Man, he has a way with words. Just peace, just peace, just peace forever. I think this guy has like a stutter or something because I've never seen someone repeat something 3 times twice in a row. Peace forever.
Man, wait a minute, you're not adding the right inflection to it, man. You got to go just peace, just peace, just peace forever, peace forever. No crazy war, no crazy war. It's like, man, he was going off in this video too, man. When he was saying it, he was really going off. He said, "No chaos, no madness, no war." And I think he's like, you know how like way back in the day before people understood how weather worked, they used to do like the rain chant and stuff like that to get the rain to fall and stuff like that. He's like going back to like old times. Like he's going back to like, this is the war chant right here. No more war. You got to say it like 50 times though for it to work.
Man, honestly, man, this feels like a typical U.S. protest at this point because you always have that loud, obnoxious fool at every protest, folks, in America that has the megaphone, and they never let go of it. It's always their turn on the talking stick, and they'll come up with some stupid slogan, and they'll just keep repeating it over and over. Like, let's see, what would be a good one? I don't even know. Y'all just fill in the blanks. Any protest, but beyond that, then he said, "Please, please, please, just peace, peace forever, peace forever." And so I think this guy's actually crashing out at this point. So that's what's going on in Venezuela today. He's just generally crashing out on national television. Anyways, we also were able to hear that there is a larger weather element in the area, according to the weather report. Which is quite interesting. Apparently, this Hurricane Melissa is forecast to rapidly intensify in the Caribbean and could reach Category 5 strength near Jamaica early next week, according to the U.S. National Hurricane Center. So it appears that our operations may be delayed due to the fact that there's going to be a Cat 5 hurricane down there in the Caribbean for a moment. But moving on out.
Oh, that's convenient, isn't it? That's convenient. It's going to take about 7 or 8 days for the carrier strike group to get down to Venezuela. They've got to wait for the hurricane to pass through. So it sounds like fate has had its way with us. It looks like we actually might be on air by the time they do something to Venezuela to cover it. So we might actually be safe during the move, actually, thanks to that hurricane and that the carrier transit time.
Also, by the way, folks, since there's still 13.2 thousand people here, and Enforcer Matt just brought that up, we have to tell you all this because it is go time almost on the 27th of October. On the 27th of October, the Enforcer gave to me several days off, and we don't really want to take them, but we are going to be taking them because we are moving the Enforcer HQ 2.0 from Birmingham, Alabama to Salt Lake City, Utah. For our European viewers, just to get this into comparison for everyone, this is a trip from Madrid to Warsaw in length if you were to drive the highways and motorways between Madrid, Spain to Warsaw, Poland. We are moving the headquarters that far. So we will be doing that move from the 27th of October to the 31st 31st of October. We are planning on hopefully being operational on the 1st of November and continuing our shows from that point. But in the meantime, we will not be running any videos or streams from the 27th of October to the 31st. Fortunately, it does appear that Venezuela, or at least the United States Department of Defense or Department of War, whatever you want to call it, thank you so much, has created a hurricane within the Caribbean and also is waiting for the carrier to get over there, which actually places us exactly at starting at the earliest on the 1st of November. So right when we're able to get back on air and continue to cover this, it appears that this will most likely be kicking off. So we will be keeping an eye on that and making sure that once we're back up and operational, we'll be on high alert for this whole thing to kick off. And also, someone said, let's see, so y'all are going to broadcast at 4 p.m. my time? Also, by the way, I do have to clarify this. Once we move, since Salt Lake City is in a different time zone, this will not affect any of y'all and your habits in watching the show. We will still be starting the show at 10 p.m. Eastern time. It's just that local time in Salt Lake City will technically be starting it at 8. But for everyone else in the world, the stream is still going to start at the exact same time of day every day that it does right now. There's going to be absolutely no change in the schedule. And so with that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news, which we also have gotten from around the world. For one, we're hearing that the United States is flying drones over the Gaza Strip to try and ensure that the ceasefire is being adhered to by both sides. And moving on from that tiny tidbit and on into Europe, we now have the big news. First, we were able to hear that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has stated that negotiations with the President on the transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine is currently underway, which is incredibly good news to hear. Meanwhile, in Belgium, they stated that they should stop where they are, according to Ruud. He stated that thousands of Russians are dying for Putin's deluded aggression. Putin is running out of money, troops, and ideas. I think he's been out of ideas the entire time he's been president of Russia. The president of the United States said it very well. They should stop where they are now. And it does appear that the NATO Secretary General is continuing with the same line of thinking, which I respect greatly. Meanwhile, moving on to Lithuania, we also were able to hear that the Lithuanians are now going to be closing their borders with Belarus temporarily. And we did get video proof of that. They're closing it.
Oh, look, you can't go through the border anymore. Look, it's a shame you can't go through the border. Who needed through there anyway? I mean, anyway.
Blit. But moving on out of that, we also were able to hear that airport closures are once again affecting the country. 2 airports in Lithuania were closed due to the presence of flying balloons from Belarus again, and multiple flights had to be diverted once more. So it does appear that at the moment, multiple balloons are continuing to fly in from Belarus to Lithuania, and at this point, folks, I gotta be straight up with y'all, this appears to be a deliberate action by the Belarusians, or the Russians at this point. Smugglers wouldn't mess up this many times because the goods are being confiscated every single time, and they would be losing a lot of money. This is a deliberate action by the Belarusians or the Russians, one or the other. Meanwhile, in
I was right. I was right. As the old phrase always goes, Matt was right about everything.
Man, are we going to make the Lee Spring Army great again? Whoa, whoa, whoa!
I was right about everything. They said, sir, how can you be wrong when you're only right? It's only right. How can I be so wrong if it's so right?
I gotta say, crazy thing. And we also get to see another drone attack inside the Russian Federation, which is ongoing right now. We don't have any video or picture evidence of the impacts, but we did get to see a little interesting clip out of Moscow, which appears to be showing some sort of electronic warfare system operating in Moscow. Which actually sent a Ukrainian drone right into this apartment building, by the way. I forgot to add in that context. Oh, look, security camera.
This is a very dangerous place for a Russian to be looking out of here. A very tall window. Very dangerous. Very dangerous. Oh.
Well, that's the end of that clip. It's interesting nonetheless. And moving on from that and into the front lines in Ukraine, we also were able to get some incredibly interesting news out of here. First over, we were able to see the F-16s of the Ukrainian Air Force in operation, caught on film.
Highway to the danger zone, right? And to...
It's the lyrics of
the
song.
Oh, this is the song.
Yeah, let's not read that.
I thought they were trying to tell us something. I was about to say, oh, wow, look, they're like narrating what they're doing here. I was like, okay, that's the song. I realized that about halfway through. Why
were you reading it like, highway to the danger zone. I was like, bro, why are you reading it like this? I was like,
Man,
it's
I
a
was
song, man.
intently. I was trying to gather some extra intelligence here. I thought they were like cluing us in on something.
Nah, man, they were just putting up the lyrics of the song, man. But moving on from that and into the location unknowns, we also got to see the Russians are apparently using Chinese-made jet engines on their drones. We were able to see that they were fitting their UMPB 5R glide bombs with Chinese SW-800 Pro Y turbojet engines, increasing their strike range to about 130 kilometers. This picture did confirm they are Chinese. Moving on from that and into our next bit of location unknown news, we also got to see this Ukrainian soldier that got very lucky. A Russian FPV drone ran right into him, and there they are. Here comes the drone. This guy's bailing. This other guy's trying to bail, and it hits him, and it doesn't blow up. He's lucky. It literally hit him, bounced right off of him, and it didn't blow up. So he lived. Look at that right there.
He just got walloped. He just got walloped, really. He got lucky.
He was very lucky. That could have gone badly, folks, because that was a dead-on hit right on to him, and it didn't blow up. I mean, that is the most fortunate that you can get. But moving on out of that, we also got to see the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours. And the casualty report was quite interesting. Mr. Isa, keeper of the record, stated that 440 drones is the 11th highest daily loss. Troop losses of a 7-day average below 1,000, but October total is above, and total October losses will exceed both August and September, which is incredibly good news to hear. And we have to give a massive shout out to Mr. Isa, keeper of the records, for keeping the records incredibly well. Moving on from that, though, over the past 24 hours, we were able to confirm that 910 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 5 APCs, 128 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 34 artillery pieces, 440 drones, and 1 MLRS. It was a pretty decent day overall, and speaking of a decent day, the front lines were really showing that. But before we get to that, we did get to see the Ukrainians caused some pretty significant damage to the dam at Grafovka in the Belgorod Oblast. This is the damage that was left behind from the Ukrainian attack. Very sad for them. I guess the Russians will have to cry about that a little bit, because that's the first time I've ever confirmed that the Ukrainians have directly tried to hit a dam. I guess you could say dam. But moving on from that and down into the area of Torske, we also were able to confirm that Ukrainian forces have liberated Torske today, pushing the Russians back out of a major town near to the area of the Liman direction, and continuing to ensure that the Russian Federation is at a significant disadvantage. Look at that. The whole thing liberated. By the 425th Scala Battalion.
I tell you, they're doing a good job out here.
Oh, they're doing an amazing job. Well, you see them doing the post-game interview here as they show footage of them clearing the town and wiping out the Russians. But you see one here running for the literal hills and then going for a nap. You see Marek here, the 425th, saying that it was like nothing he's ever seen before. It was great. Like taking candy from a baby.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, that's really rude. Why the hell do people do that?
Honestly, I've never understood when people say, yeah, it was like taking candy from a baby. I'm like, what are you, a sicko or something? I'm like, what are you doing stealing candy from a baby? I mean, what does that say about yourself, eh?
Man, that says that they're a crook. Like, that's what it really says.
I am not a crook. That baby was not entitled to that Smarty.
Listen, I've got to be entirely honest with you. That baby might have said that I stole that Hershey's chocolate bar from it, but I'm not a crook, and I didn't steal that chocolate bar.
Wiretap that line.
Make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. but beyond that, well, you see them continuing to give the post-game interview.
Look at this young man right here.
I don't think he's young. Like, I don't think he's young. I was just thinking about that. I was like, I think that's a hint of gray hair up there.
Now, this is a young man.
I don't know. I still think that's missing the mark a little bit, just a little bit.
What's young anyway? It's all, relative.
Oh, perhaps.
I mean, to some people, if you're 110, 70 might be young. It depends, what the sad part probably is, some of these guys here who look like they're about 70, they're probably more like 40 or 50, but the war is like probably aged them like hell, or like the stress of having to live through this wartime scenario stressed them. There's probably no telling how old these people really are.
Interestingly enough, though, the average age of a Ukrainian service member in the war right now, I think, is somewhere in the higher 30s, like around 36 to 37.
These guys could be about 40 or 50, even though they look like they're, no offense to them, by the way, but they look like they're aging a little bit more rapidly.
Oh, yes, I see you're aging well. But nevertheless, we're going to cut this clip a little bit short, but it does show us that they have liberated the Torske area today. Moving further on down, we also heard of continued liberations happening around the area of Novi Shakovi and Kucherev Yar, just north of the Pokrovsk front line. We were able to see that a lot of footage and information came out today from multiple different sources confirming that the Ukrainians have not only repelled the Russians in this area, but have counterattacked and have continued to take ground. Once again, another significant battlefield gain outside the one at Torske. We also saw some footage coming out of Pokrovsk of the 1,129th Anti-Air Missile Regiment continuing to intercept and destroy Russian drones that were trying to overfly the Pokrovsk area and conduct reconnaissance on Ukrainian forces within that front. We could see here the Ukrainian drone coming on in and landing itself a hit on an actual Zala.
It's a zala zala zing, zala zala boom. That thing is gone.
Man, that thing is gone. But moving on further down the line, we also saw near Zaporizhia a Russian attack that was attempted today and, of course, failed. We did see some Rodniks vehicles burning in the middle of the street after the attack had failed.
Burns quite nicely. Oh, that's one of those Chinese like Humvee ripoff looking things, or Humvee like Jeep type deals.
Oh, I see you'll dirt bikes well, or golf carts well, good one. And you, sir, are you ready to receive my Desert Cross? But moving on from that and on into a little bit more of an unfortunate note, the Russian Federation has continued bombardments of civilian areas of Kherson over the course of the day. This footage here showing us those very bombardments on the city of Kherson. The Russian Federation has been keeping up a continuous campaign of bombardment on the city of Kherson over prior months in an effort to terrorize the civilian populace and also lead to a destabilization of the morale within the Kherson region. As a result of this, a significant number of civilians have died in these bombardments, including family members of the very well-known LSA Sergeant Figment here on the channel. His uncle actually did die in a Russian FPV drone strike that was conducted in Kherson on a minivan that was moving through the area. These strikes, once again, are clearly showing the Russian Federation conducting war crimes on the civilian population of Ukraine, which is in violation of the Geneva Convention. None of these targets have been confirmed to have any enemy combatants within the buildings or residences, and for this reason, due to the lack of visual identification of armed combatants anywhere within the area that's being bombarded, and also due to the fact that it's a mass saturation bombardment, which is very inaccurate and will generally cause a high amount of civilian collateral, this clearly is another war crime that the Russian Federation has filmed and has proudly shown the public once again today, which we're now showing y'all right now.
It's a lot of hits.
A very unfortunate sort of a situation. But nevertheless, the Ukrainians continue to persist, and no matter what, they will continue to fight the Russian Federation with the support of the entirety of the Western world behind them until the eventual day that the Russian Federation will collapse and that they will come out triumphant on top of this war. But with that, folks, it's time for us to move y'all up into Kyiv and get y'all to the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, today. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Шановні українці, українки, зараз вже відбулася зустріч з лідерами в Лондоні. Це третя хороша подія для України за кілька днів. Буде більше санкцій проти Росії і в тому напрямку, в якому є рішення Сполучених Штатів Америки. Це дуже правильний крок президента Сполучених Штатів Америки. Санкції проти двох російських нафтових компаній, вони експортують багато нафти. Сьогодні всі, абсолютно всі учасники коаліції охочих погодились, що саме так треба тиснути і надалі на російську нафту, на нафтові компанії Росії, на термінали, на флот російських танкерів та на всю інфраструктуру агресора. Ми сьогодні погодили рішення, які можуть нам сильно допомогти. Поки що публічно ми не будемо говорити всі деталі, щоб Путіну було складніше. І хоча росіяни зараз понесли світом сигнал, що їхню економіку санкції начебто не зачіпають, всі все бачать. Черги на заправках в Росії, і банкрутство російських регіонів, і дефіцит федерального бюджету Росії. Саме санкції – одне з найбільш болісного для Путіна, особисто для нього. Друге, є дуже важливі домовленості по фінансам для України. Є політична готовність Європи направити заморожені російські активи на повноцінну підтримку України, українців. І вчора на Єврораді ухвалено політичне рішення, чіткий формат використання активів. І цей формат є. Зараз ми в Європі домовились, що до кінця року має бути реалізація цього формату. Загалом в Європі такий, що ми розуміємо, на наступний рік фінансування для України, для наших людей буде забезпечено. Третє. Все, що стосується зброї, все, що стосується протиповітряної оборони, позицій наших на фронті. Вже є нові пакети від наших партнерів. Також наше розуміння далекобійності знаходить все більше прихильників. І, значить, буде більше наших влучних, далекобійних санкцій, санкцій прямої дії проти російської машини війни. Це працює за тисячі кілометрів. І ще дуже хочу подякувати кожному, хто підтримує нас в питанні про протиповітряну оборону, про системи. Ми працюємо з країнами заради більшої кількості патріотів і ракет до них. Також сьогодні вже є рішення Італії, вони готують пакет на підтримку нашої енергетики. Дякуємо. Є рішення Норвегії щодо фінансування закупівлі газу. Дуже дякуємо. Є у нас хороші домовленості з іншими країнами, нашими партнерами в Європі. Команди зараз працюють над реалізацією, і ми будемо працювати щодо енергетики вже з новим урядом Японії. І сьогодні нова прем'єр-міністр Японії взяла участь в зустрічі коаліції охочих. Ми розраховуємо, що кожен з учасників Великої Сімки від Америки і Канади до Японії продовжить свої кроки, щоб підтримати нас, підтримати Україну, підтримати наших людей. Звісно, Швеція – нова і найбільша домовленість для нашої бойової авіації. Ми працюємо заради флоту Гріпенів, класних бойових літаків. Ми підписали перший документ, і ми розраховуємо на 150 літаків. Це довгострокова гарантія безпеки для сильної та сучасної, незалежної України. Це історичний крок. Дякуємо всім, хто нам допомагає. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Героям слава!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, here on day 1,339 of the news from around the world. And that's going to be moving us, y'all, into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And I've got to say, folks, that tonight has been an absolutely interesting night of news. I also have to tell y'all, in a bit of a mixed way, I'm actually a little bit happy to hear that there is a hurricane going on in the Caribbean, and also the carrier is expected to arrive in the Caribbean on the 1st, because, at least for now, that's generally guaranteeing that if we start to conduct any major armed actions against Venezuela, we're actually going to be around to be live on air to cover that for all of y'all. Which is
Have you ever considered running for president, by the way?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. Why would you say that?
I think you might have the mindset. I think you might have the mindset for it. Man, I sure am glad that hurricane's hitting. It's really doing me quite well, I must say. Quite well. That's your misfortune, but my gain, I must admit.
Well, I mean, you know, like as far as the folks here on the channel, Matthew, they count on us every day for their news coverage, and so we want to make sure to be around and live in case of something major happens, you know, so that way they can hear about it. Because a lot of y'all, if I'm not mistaken, y'all are counting on us for your primary news coverage every day. So we want to be around to be able to cover this, because I put a lot of stock in what we do covering the news for all of y'all. So I like to know that if something big is going to happen, we're going to be around to be able to cover it for all of y'all, so that we all can hear about it live on air. But you know, honestly, folks, I think I am generally cut out to be the president, because you know, like the hurricanes and all, you know, it is opportune timing. You know, you got to think in this way, folks, when you get into foreign policy and all. And also, Sundown said, enforcers should run for president. You know, in 2040, you'll be able to try. You'll be able to try and vote for me then. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. Also, by the way, Mandy, that was a pretty funny joke. I know I took it seriously, but I was like, I have to give the disclaimer. But beyond that, nobody does hurricanes better than I do. Everyone goes, sir, we have to wait so that the enforcers can cover this great stuff. And I said, well, get up the guys on the National Weather Service. We've been making earthquakes around the world for weeks, and now we need to make a hurricane so the enforcer boys have their little window so that way they can drive out to Salt Lake and set up and get ready to cover this news. It's a great, wonderful thing. Nobody does it better than them.
You know, what's really fascinating about that is if you really look closely at it, it's interesting because the hurricane was heading straight for Venezuela before it suddenly took a hard right turn. It was heading straight for them, and it's weird. It is, I don't know why. I'm gonna have to level with y'all for a minute. I don't know why. I'm not feeling the RFK impersonation tonight. I had to like interrupt that broadcast for a second to bring you a reality check. I don't really feel like I'm in the spirit for that tonight. It didn't feel like it was hitting right. So I'm gonna revert back to my voice. I hope that was enough for everybody. But honestly, though, like I saw a conspiracy theorist today saying that, oh, the U.S. is using that HARP weather like modifier thing to like turn the hurricane away from Venezuela, so that way the U.S. can still attack if they want to. I thought I'd heard it all, but the conspiracy theories always get worse every single time. It's like, do they really think if they had the HARP thing and it really modified the weather like that, they would have simply caused the hurricane not to exist in the first place? That would have been the easiest way to handle it.
Yeah, that's something that always. Also, I could hear myself there for just a second on your end. I don't know why that just happened, but that's always so weird with the conspiracy theories. I always have to say this is something that's so funny to me, folks. Conspiracy theorists make no sense to me, at least the really extreme ones, because they always make it sound like the government controls everything on the planet. But crazily enough, while they control everything and nothing is beyond their ability, including controlling people's minds and the weather and the stars and everything else, for some reason the government just cannot control that very person who's the conspiracy theorist and stop them from coming up with these stupid ideas, which is always the paradox to a lot of the conspiracy theorists. It's like, okay, so if the government is able to control people's minds and even control the weather and create earthquakes all over the planet, why in the world can they not control your mind to make you stop thinking up these stupid theories? Like, that's my question. That's really my question. It's like at that point, it's like, are you control opposition? And then it's like at that point, you end up becoming a conspiracy theory yourself by being a conspiracy theorist, because now they're controlling your mind to make you into a conspiracy theorist, and then you enter this whole other can of worms that makes no sense. I'm just like, I believe in conspiracy theories that are reasonable. Like, for example, like a good example of a reasonable conspiracy theory would be that the United States has ulterior motives to what it's doing in Venezuela, but nothing crazy. It's not like there's like a demon or a goblet or a portal down there to hell or something that we're trying to get to. Nothing stupid like that. It's just, maybe we're trying to curb Chinese influence or something like that. Like, that's a reasonable conspiracy theory. It's one that makes sense.
Yeah.
But coming up with something crazy like, 50 million years ago, the god angel of Abkhazar came down to the planet and had sex with an alien and had a little child and then ended up being humans. Like, they're like, some conspiracy theories get like that crazy. And it's like, I don't even know how in the world people come up with this stuff, because it's like, how much free time do you have on your how much free time do you have on your hands? And two, how many drugs are you taking to come up with these crazy theories?
Yeah, really. I tell you, some of those conspiracy theories apparently are getting exotic. I hadn't heard about those before. But also at the same time, I see people saying HARP is real, guys. It's real. Yes, there is an array in, I believe it's Alaska is where it's located, called HARP, but it's a passive system, or at least that's what the USA says it is. It's a passive system for research. So, I mean, it's not something transmitting, to my knowledge. At least I don't know everything about it, but we've been cloud seeding for a long time. I see people saying, well, weather manipulation is something that's been going on for a long time. That is true, but cloud seeding is a whole different thing. Also, the whole what's the other thing? The contrail theory, the chemtrails, whatever you call them. Yeah, the people get confused between the water vapor and the water droplets creating like a streak in the sky, and also like the difference between spraying a chemical or that. It's like, there's usually a pretty rational explanation for this stuff, but people love to be dreamy about it. Some of them turn out to be true, but a lot of them don't.
Also, another thing that's really funny about the whole weather manipulation thing It is very, very limited. And on top of that, it's existed for a really long time. Because a lot of people are like, oh, cloud seeding is brand new. No, it's not. It's old. It's like 100 years old at this point. The first time cloud seeding was ever done, it was done in the 1920s. And I forgot where it was, but it was in the US Southwest, in California or someplace like that. And there had been a drought. And this con man came through. And he was like, yes, you see, I have the answer. With all these stupid fireworks with these special kinds of chemicals in them and minerals, I can shoot them up in the air and they'll explode and the rain will come. And the people were like, that sounds like it might actually be reasonable. I don't know why they thought that, but they paid him. He actually shot the fireworks up. They exploded in the atmosphere a little bit higher on up. And then nothing happened. And then they all got flooded out right after that. Like about 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, a monsoon came through and pretty much almost washed the whole town away. And then it turned out this guy, while being a con man, actually had ended up coming up with cloud seeding as a usable principle. So then some scientists later on started to develop it a little bit further, and cloud seeding is done from time to time, but it's not like a surefire way of getting rains. It only increases the chance of a rain coming around, but it doesn't give you a surefire guarantee.
Yeah, but they've gotten it pretty good these days. Like what it's how efficient it is. I think there's a Middle Eastern country out there that does it. I think it might be Saudi Arabia that does it. I can't remember, but they've gotten really good at it. They'll fly up like a private jet or some type of aircraft that has these little rocket modules on the side. They'll light the rockets and it puts the I believe it's like silver iodide. It's some chemical they'll put into the sky and it causes more moisture to gather and it causes clouds and then therefore causes rain. So I mean, it sounds pretty straightforward. Now, obviously, I haven't done it, so I can't say I know about it firsthand, but it sounds pretty straightforward. So I'm pretty sure that they're probably doing it more than we know, but there's no evidence, though, that we're forming hurricanes or something using a radar installation in Alaska. That's a little bit far-fetched.
Yeah, and also then there's all the other crazy conspiracies that he brought up just to say, Matthew did. Like, what was the other one? There was another one that was pretty funny. Oh yeah, the chemtrail deal. The chemtrails aren't real. Like they don't like that's not a real thing. They're contrails, which is condensation trails. That's what the con stands for in the contrails. To explain it, how it works, because this is how it's always been since flight has ever reached anywhere higher up in altitude, above 20,000 to 30,000 feet or so, is that the air is frigid up there. It's minus 100 degrees most of the time around those altitudes, or minus 70 at least, so it's absolutely freezing cold. Any sort of a propeller or jet engine at that altitude is creating a huge amount of heat, which heats up the water vapors in the air that are present at those altitudes heavily, and then it condenses in the extreme cold, which creates a cloud, or a condensation trail, which is pretty much just a cloud. That's it. There's no chemicals in it, or anything crazy like that. It's just what it is. And I would also have to say, a lot of people who come up with, like, these crazy conspiracy theories, when you ever ask them about their knowledge of anything, they don't really have a lot of knowledge on anything. Like they come up with this stuff because they don't know a lot, and it's almost like magic to them. And so then they just come up with these crazy theories as to why these things exist or what they are. And it's like, do you think a ground crew, like because here's how the conspiracy theory works with the whole chemtrail thing, folks. The conspiracy theorists believe that every single airplane on the planet, literally every single one of them, when they're being refueled, the ground crews go and access this special tank on the plane that they fill up with all of these mind control chemicals, and then when the plane takes off, it's just spreading mind control chemicals throughout the whole atmosphere while it flies. And it's like, don't you think a ground crewman, if he actually ever did that, because there's hundreds of thousands of them in the world, which apparently all of them would have to be in on it, wouldn't one of them come out and say that that's a real thing? Or at least you would see that when you're literally at the airport watching them refuel the plane before you board it. Wouldn't you see that?
Yeah, you know what's odd about that? The weird irony about it? It's not the chemtrails that's the mind control chemical. It's the phone that they're holding in their hand that's feeding them this like TikTok garbage as the mind control chemical. They're literally holding it right in their hand, but yet they keep talking about their stuff in the sky doing it. It's like you literally have a brainwashing device literally right here. You're scrolling through 30-second videos of propaganda left and right. So it's like that's what's really screwing your mind up. It's not the chemicals out of the plane flying over your head, which is not even chemicals. It's water vapor and droplets. It's just wild, man. Like, I think some people like to fill their time with stuff like that. It makes things more exciting, I guess. I guess it's like the same thing. Some people get caught up with like fiction novels and stuff like that. I don't know. Like me personally, I never read the fiction novels. I never really cared for it that much. I was always in the nonfiction section of the library when I was forced to go there. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely crazy stuff, folks. And then like, the whole deal with 9/11 and the Twin Towers and jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. It's like, yeah, but it causes them to get weakened and warp because the heat's that high. It's like that doesn't take rocket science. Like, do these people not know about like blacksmithing, like just as a basic skill? It's like, blacksmiths didn't have to melt the steel to turn it into a sword or anything they wanted to. They just heated it up until it was bendable and weak, not melted, and then they would hammer it with a hammer really lightly, not even strong like, to turn it into whatever they wanted. So it's like if a blacksmith can take a blank and heat that up and then hit it with a hammer and turn it into a sword, wouldn't it make a good amount of sense that burning hot jet fuel near a steel beam that's turning that steel beam straw yellow from the heat would be able to warp it enough that it wouldn't be able to hold the weight up further on up, and then it would start to break, and then it would eventually give way? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
that just makes obvious sense. I mean, hell, go look at Atlanta. Like, I think a shopping cart caught on fire under an Atlanta interstate overpass a while ago, and it burned hot enough that it caused structural damage to the bridge's steel beams under the bridge. It's like, if a shopping cart on fire can do that, jet fuel can easily cause enough damage to warp a steel beam. Like, it doesn't take a lot of knowledge to
Yeah.
know that one.
And also, by the way, what was that business about the aliens or something having the intimate relations with the people? What was that one?
Oh my god, that's like a whole rabbit hole. It's an insane one. So there's this there is this belief, like I'm not even kidding. This is a real conspiracy theory. So there is this belief that there are these super aliens out there somewhere in the world, and some of them look like reptile-like aliens, and other ones look like angelic elves. So this is like some like nut who got a hold of Dungeons and Dragons or something and just took off with it. So millions of years ago, they ended up coming down to this planet. There's like a book cover with this on it, by the way, not like graphic or anything like that, but it gets the point across. And apparently they, did it, and then their offspring was a human. So there's this whole conspiracy out there that because of this esoteric deal or whatever, I don't even know how it's described, that's how humans exist. I'm like, this is just stupidity at this point. Like, how in the hell do people come up with this stuff?
So what's that say about the people that are messing around with the reptile-looking things? It's like, what does that say about them? Like, I mean, is that not a concern to anybody? It's like, what is anybody asking these people questions about? Well, if you saw a reptile weirdo-looking thing, it's like, why were you know what I'm talking about?
You know what I'm talking about.
You
I
know what I
mean,
mean? This conspiracy theory sounds like something that I might have like a few questions to ask that person. Like maybe it might be time for someone like serious of authority to ask some questions about that.
I'm not gonna lie, man. I will pull up the book cover on screen, but I don't even want to show it. It's not anything like
Oh,
graphic.
I don't
That
want to see it if it's graphic, man.
it's nothing graphic like at all. Like, it's like very PG for what it is. But it's the cover of the book. I'm not even gonna show it though because it's just so weird. I don't even want the channel to be affiliated even with the cover of that deal. But that's a real theory out there. You can go pull it up and look at it. It's just insane. Also, someone said this. I got to address this. We actually have a 9/11 denier here, and I'm like, this is a crazy sort of a thing. Someone said, "You are stupid," but they used the other word that starts with an R for us because of this one. Buildings are designed to hold the weight on top. When did a fire reach the bottom 25% of the World Trade Center? I don't know if you're blind. You can literally go look at footage on YouTube of the Twin Towers collapsing. They collapsed at the point of impact from the aircraft at the upper part of the building, not at the bottom 25% part. Like, you have to be blind to not even know that. Secondly, if you had any sense right there in your noggin, so think with your head here, if steel gets really hot, if anything gets really hot, what starts to happen? It starts to get weak and it starts to bend. You don't have to melt something for it to break. You just have to get it hot enough that it starts to bend. That's just common sense. It doesn't take a lot to know that one. And that's why I think that the 9/11 deniers are some of the dumbest people on the planet, because there's no way in hell that you can sit there and go through all these hurdles to come up with a stupid conspiracy theory like that and not just look at basic metallurgy or just even the fact that blacksmiths don't melt steel to make objects. They just heat them up to where they're malleable and then they hit them with a hammer to turn them into what they want. I mean, that doesn't take a lot to figure out. Like you've got to be just like, you got to be the lowest denominator of intelligence to sit there and not just crack open a book on how metallurgy works and then immediately go into the stupid theories about the government destroyed the building. Like that, like why would the government destroy the building? Like there is no real reason to even do that. And on top of that, another thing is that the government is not an all-seeing eye. Because if they were, they would hear the stupid stuff you're saying, and they would say that you're stupid, and they just tell you that like right now. What the thing is about the Twin Towers, they knew it was coming. Everyone in the CIA knew it was coming, at least some sort of a major attack, but they didn't know where. And that is entirely reasonable, because that's usually what they're working with. They just know something's about to happen, but they don't know what, and then they're racing to figure out what this big thing that's about to happen really is. That's just simple and easy to know. So with that, I hope that does address that well. But I mean, come on, man, you gotta have some sense in your brain and actually read something real instead of fiction. Like, go read some nonfiction and read something real, and come up with a real theory or something that actually sticks and is founded in reality. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So with that, moving on from the whole thing about conspiracy theories and people having relations with reptile-looking people, things and stuff like that, we are moving on to our super chat questions here, and moving on to our first one. This one goes to Howard Mendelson, and Howard put in a very generous $100 support, and a huge shout out to you, Howard, once again for being a longtime channel legend, and we do appreciate that. He said, "What animal will they use to replace the tanks in Russia?"
Oh, that's a good question. I think they're going to go back to the old Tachanka. Y'all know what a Tachanka is? Let me go get y'all the Tachanka carriage. This is the Tachanka carriage. It was a 3-horse carriage, and these were actually used in Ukraine a lot in the late 1900s after the Russian Civil War started by the anarchists in Ukraine. And they would just do drive-bys with these. I'm not even kidding. It was like legitimate drive-bys. They'd whip up on their wagon, and they'd just unload with a Maxim gun on whoever was there. It was wildly effective, actually. So I think that's what they're going to replace the tanks with, is Tachankas, I think. But anyways, also here's another example of a Tachanka. It's just a machine gun on the back of a wagon. So they just whip this thing up, spin it around, and start running away as fast as they can with the horses, while the guy in the back is just laying into someone with a machine gun. So, you know, kind of like the earlier version of the drive-bys that you would see in Compton. Anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And I hope that does address the question incredibly well. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are going to be moving on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Brian Justin, and Brian puts in the 100 as well, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, Brian J. here, and Venezuela has 2 critical Chinese satellite teleports used to downlink data from China's geostationary satellites spying on the U.S., and the U.S. can't bomb an asset owned by China, but control Venezuela, and then you get indirect control of the teleports.
That is an interesting proposition. However, if China actually does have one of those in Venezuela and it appears to be threatened, they are certainly going to destroy it before it ever comes under American control, because they would know that that would be a major national security risk for them. But still, a very interesting point, and that is true if we could capture it intact. But at the same time, it's highly likely, especially with China now watching for months our buildup on Venezuela, they're already prepared to destroy the system itself before it ever falls into the hands of the United States. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, oh man, y'all, we got the conspiracy theorists triggered. Everyone's like, how did Building 7 collapse? And I see everyone bringing up the clear point. Building 7 was on fire for hours before it collapsed. Like, you know, fires cause major structural damage. that's like a fact. Like, I don't know if y'all know that, but for the people who are saying that, but the Notre Dame, when it caught on fire in 2019, the fire alone, with it being a masonwork structure of sound construction, the fire was enough alone to leave people in a lot of fear that the whole Notre Dame might implode on itself, because the fire was causing the vaults to collapse, and that could start to weaken the entire structure. I mean, this sort of a deal, it doesn't take a lot, folks. It doesn't take a lot. It's usually just there right in front of you. You don't have to come up with a whole bunch of crazy stuff. Real life is interesting enough without having to add a whole bunch of unrealistic stuff to it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Marion Deemert, who puts in a 100 as well. And a huge shout out to Marion for that massive support, and we do appreciate that. And Marion said, for your coffee and snacks on the trip to Utah, and hugs.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support for the coffee and the snacks. We love the coffee and the snacks, Marion Deemert, and I got to thank you incredibly for that support, because we're going to need a lot of coffee and snacks. This is supposed to be roughly about a 27 to 30 hour trip. From here to Salt Lake. 33, actually. So it's going to be a pretty lengthy little trip here. And hopefully we'll be able to knock it out really quickly and get ourselves into Salt Lake and have everything set up and ready to go by the 1st of November. So I've got to thank you so much for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, we wouldn't be able to make it possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling well into the future, and also have this thing rolling well during the move itself. So a humongous, incredible thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Richard Ager. And Richard puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, good sir, for that massive support. He said, another attempt to super chat. And how do you reconcile the deaths of drug smugglers caused by U.S. strikes with reasonable force? And when is it murder? Or is there some law that permits this action? And it's a discussion I'm encountering in Australia.
And that is actually a really contentious sort of a debate at the moment, even in America right now, about this sort of a deal. But I'll explain both sides, because really, depending on what position you take on this, there really isn't a clear answer. One, I'll start with the justifications for it, and then I'll start with the lack of justification next. But the justifications for these actions is that all of these cartels within South and Central America have been declared by the U.S. government as terrorist organizations, and terrorist organizations under international law are provided practically no protections. If they are within international waters or anywhere that is considered to be an international zone, they can be attacked without any recourse or any attempt to apprehend them. That is generally the law. That's also why you see that everyone in the Middle East conducts endless strikes on terrorist groups without any real identification or great deal of an attempt to even apprehend these people being conducted, is because they are terrorist groups, and so they're generally given no protections under international law. Much like pirates, which are also generally considered terrorist groups as well, are given absolutely no protections, and you generally have the authority as a country to kill them outright without any form of due process or any form of an attempted apprehension. On the other hand, however, for the people who argue against this, we do not really know who's on the vessels, and that's what's causing a lot of questionability and making this a big discussion. The United States government has not been transparent about the people on these vessels. They haven't given any names of the people on board ever, from what I can recall, of anyone who's been killed by name, which you would think that they would give, because, like, for example, with the Israelis will say, we killed Bassem Banabi, who was so-and-so, who was a air defense commander in Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And that will make you go, oh, well, that sounds like they knew who they were hitting. On the other hand, the U.S. will just say 3 people were killed on the boat, end of story. And there's no real information about who was on the boat, if they were definitely involved at all. And there also isn't any further expounding by the Department of Defense on what was on board the vessel. They always say that there's drugs on board the vessel, every time they hit them, obviously, but they still, at the same time, never give any proof about what exactly is on the vessel. Like, they never point it out, like, when they're showing the video and say, right there, that's the drugs. We were able to confirm that when they were loading it, and we know that they were loading it because we had sources. Something like that, to just give reassurance to the public. That's not going on right now, and that's why a lot of people are saying there isn't really a justification for this, because the case isn't being built in the public well enough to really say that these strikes are 100% justified. On the other hand, though, if they're being claimed as being a part of a cartel, they're provided no protections anyways under international law. We can do whatever we want to them. But at the same time, a lot of people want to be definitely sure that these people are involved in a cartel and have a little bit more transparency provided by the current administration about what's going on with that. Also, the other thing is, and I've got to say this because this is also the case, in America, whenever anyone does anything, half of people love it and half of people hate it. It doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. So some people are also going to make that argument and say this is wrong just because they do not like the president that's in charge. Case in point, of the current administration on Ukraine. For the past several years, they have made Ukraine out to be a state of crooks that are robbing America blind, and that any sort of support to Ukraine in any way should completely stop. Now that's completely changed, and now they're all on board with the war in Ukraine, and as a matter of fact, they're all against Putin as well now. And now you'll start to see that some others, because they don't like the president, when they were all gung-ho on being super aggressive on the Russians, now they're going to say the president's being way too aggressive on the Russians, and now he's going to start World War III when we don't have to start World War III. So there's also that kind of dynamic that exists in the United States as well. But generally, that's the two sides of the argument that you can make. Me, generally, I would actually have to be on the side of the argument that these are questionable just due to the fact that we're not providing enough information to the public for the public to have the sureness of mind that these strikes are actually being conducted against terrorist individuals that are members of these cartels, either by naming them publicly, not that anyone would know them by name, but just giving names of the individuals who were hit on the boat would definitely give us a lot of credence to know, well, they definitely have done their homework to know who these people are and that they're involved in the cartel, and also to pretty much outline to the public exactly where the contraband is on board the vessels. Because if you can lay out the proof of the contraband and the proof that some of these people are named members of the cartel that we know of due to our intelligence, you really kind of kill the whole argument that not enough identification is being done, because at that point you've hit the two bases. I mean, the identification is done. You confirmed the drugs were there, or some sort of illegal contraband, and you also confirmed that at least some people on board the vessel were involved in illegal terrorist operations. And then at that point, you can kind of argue, although this wouldn't work under U.S. law, this kind of works under international law, that the others had to be assumed cartel members because of guilt by association. They're on a vessel being operated by a terrorist force at that point, so generally you would take the reasonable assumption those people might will highly likely be up to no good either. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least for that whole argument and what's going on with it right now and the two sides of the argument that we're seeing at the moment. And I do thank you massively for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that gives you a little bit more of a background on both sides, because really with this one, it's subject to opinion. You can really argue either, and you can make a pretty good argument for both. But with that, a big thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Richard Ager once again, and he puts in another $50 support. And thank you very much, Richard, for the second super chat. And he said, thanks to all who provided an answer to my earlier question. And it's really good to get such a good cross-section of ideas so quickly without abuse. And Slava LSA.
And I thank you so much for the support, Richard Eager. And it's great to see people in the Leaf Spring Army being an amazing community. It's a wonderful thing, and I gotta say that outside the conspiracy theorists that just came out of the woodwork to cuss us out when we started to say the conspiracy theories made no sense, the Elite Spring Army is an absolutely incredible and amazing community all around, filled with a lot of people who are incredibly intelligent on all sorts of topics, or every single topic for that matter. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next super chat goes to Ross Nib, and Ross put in a 50. I think that is maybe that's actually his first one of the night. But thank you very much, Ross, for the $50 support, and we do appreciate that. Very generous. He said, fellows, I can't thank you enough for speaking to facts and reason, and conspiracy nuts can't be reached in his opinion, but good on you for trying to save them from their blind fixations. Honestly, Ross, I will say this. I am sympathetic to evidence-based conspiracies. If there is some evidence to back it up within reason, I'm willing to listen. But if it's completely left field with zero evidence and it's just based on someone's opinion, then that's where I draw the line. And a lot of these conspiracies today are on that fringe. So usually I don't take much credence on them. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, I generally just don't really agree with most of any conspiracy theories. A lot of them are just extreme and outlandish. The reason why I argue against them, though, is not to try and change anyone's opinions, at least on that, because a lot of the people who believe in that, if you tell them they're wrong, their immediate counter, because I've dealt with this before, is they'll just sit there and tell you that you're clearly a fluoride drinker and that the government has you under 100% mind control, or something along those lines. So they won't ever listen to you because you're one of the drones or whatever they call you. But the one thing I do say that, though, is so that way other people who may be hearing a conspiracy theory or may hear a conspiracy theory in the future, they'll be like, yeah, that is pretty stupid and that makes no sense. That's generally why I say it. But still, a humongous thanks to you so much for the support. And also, it's a really interesting thing, though, because some people are like, oh, plenty of conspiracy theories do make sense. No, like some of them do. Like for example, the whole MK Ultra one with the CIA back in the day under Alan Dulles trying to figure out if there's such a thing about mind control and all. I mean, that's not that far out. Like, that's not outlandish or it's unreal.
Oh hell, that's definitely out. That hell, man, MK Ultra was crazy. Like it was extremely outlandish.
MK Ultra was crazy, but it's not hard to say, oh, the CIA is experimenting with seeing if mind control is possible. I mean, look at what Unit 731 was doing in Manchuria, which was so crazy that during the war, whenever anyone said something about there's this crazy Japanese unit in Manchuria that's doing all of this nutty stuff to people, everyone was like, that just sounds like nuts. That sounds made up. But it was happening. I mean, saying that someone's experimenting with something, that's a reasonable conspiracy theory. Like saying that the CIA has the ability to control anyone's minds at will, and they have a super duper like laser weapon that shoots out radar beams at someone's brain and immediately turns them into an automaton, that's absolutely insane. Like someone needs to get.
I mean, Havana syndrome. I mean, Havana syndrome is some type of focused energy weapon that does actually cause apparently mental damage to people, at least according to some preliminary evidence. So it's not too far-fetched on that one. And also on MK Ultra as well. It was more than just simply experimenting with mind control techniques. It was a lot more than that. Now tell me this. If someone walked up to you today and said, I was having depression, so I went to the psychologist, and the psychologist dosed me with LSD. They put me through experiments called psychic driving, where they hit me on the head with a hammer 50 times and kept repeating something in my ear and then expected me to carry it out. You would say, that person sounds crazy. But at the same time, though, that turned out to be true. They were actually doing that. They were hiring a psychologist to go out and do that. They were taking unsuspecting mental patients and putting them through horrible, horrible experiments, dosing them with all kinds of drugs and doing all kinds of horrible things that people were really shocked to believe. But it turned out to be true.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. Doing that to some person, like just injecting someone with drugs, and doing some silly stuff to them like that, versus the government can make an earthquake or control a tornado or a hurricane like an RC car. Those are like two totally different things. Like it's like to speak of this in like a realistic sense, it is very easy to go up to someone and inject them with drugs. If you think about that in the realistic sense of how hard would that be to do, it is a totally different animal to sit there and say, let's control a hurricane like an RC car. Like those are two totally different camps of possibility. One of them is possible, like anyone could go and do that. Like hell, like if anything has been proven, as long as there's some sort of a secret police force out there or some sort of a more so covert group, they get away with a lot of stuff. The Stasi did, MI6 has, the KGB and the FSB have, everyone does. So anything dealing with the person-to-person level of just doing something to someone, I mean, that's not really out of the question of being unreal. But saying that, like chemtrails and weather control to an extreme degree and all that sort of deal, that's like getting out there to being just like insanely outlandish.
Well, I got a crazier one for you that I'm not sure if you've ever heard of. Back in the day, sort of around the same time period as MK Ultra, there was an experiment that the government sponsored. They would go to places where there were men looking for women that provided services. They would then go and follow these individuals to a hotel, and the hotel room had a two-way mirror in it. So on one side of the mirror, you would have a psychologist, also individuals affiliated with the CIA, and they would watch these individuals in this room, all that stuff. They would watch this whole situation, and they would unbeknowingly have the woman dose that man with LSD, and then they would watch the responses through the two-way glass. If you told me that and I didn't hear about the proof of it, I'd be like, that sounds pretty crazy. That sounds like someone trying to, write off some bad behavior or something like that. But it actually turned out to be true.
But then again, you're explaining another experiment though that's happening just on a person. Like, they're just hitting him up with drugs and seeing what happens. Like that's not the same level of, oh, the government is filling up every single plane with mind control chemicals and flying them everywhere around the world. And for some reason, no ground control crewman has ever said that that's actually happening because they're the ones filling up the planes with it, according to the conspiracy theory. Like, those are two totally different ones. Or like with 9/11 saying the government self-destructed the building, and just blew it up with bombs, when literally nobody around the area can ever attest to that, and that doesn't even make any sense. Those are two totally different levels of conspiracy theories. Like saying, oh, well, the government went down to Tuskegee and injected with a whole bunch of people with syphilis and watched what happened to them. I mean, if we're speaking about that in the realm of possibility, that is so much easier to do than trying to create a hurricane or anything along those lines. You literally, all you have to do is go down there, pretend to be a medical professional, and then give someone a shot. That's it, and then you just watch what happens. Or, like, for example, with the nuclear tests that used to happen in Nevada, just watch where the radiation floats, let it drop down on people, and over a couple of decades, gather health statistics from that area and see if there's any adverse side effects from radiation exposure and see what happens. Like, all those things are passive and very easy to pull off when you really think about them, as compared to everything else. Like, all the other conspiracy theories that I'm talking about, those are just absolutely insane, and there is no real grounding to them at all.
Yeah, it is quite wild. Also, by the way, another one I'm not sure if you've heard of. Also around the same time, honestly, during the MK Ultra experiments, which I think it went on for over a decade. Actually, they were doing it for a long time. But they had gone over to a small little village. I believe it was on the coast of France or Italy. I can't remember. I think it was on the coast of France. They went over there and they dosed bread in this village in France on the coast with LSD, because this was the time where they had just discovered LSD, and they were trying to see if LSD was like this magical mind control chemical they could use to control people and turn people into Manchurian candidates or try to extract information out of people through the chemical. So they went over there to the coast of France and they dosed the village with LSD, and they waited to see what happened. Well, it turned out the entire village went berserk. The people all ate the LSD, the whole village went berserk, and it was a mess. And I think some people might actually passed away from that whole thing. So they were doing some crazy stuff. Like back then, the CIA was like the Wild West. Like they were just wild and loose back in the day. They've gotten better at hiding it. They've gotten probably better at hiding it, honestly. So we don't get to hear about that today, but I'm not really sure how MK Ultra came to light. I'm not sure if there was a whistleblower that brought it to light. I can't recall that part of it, but however it came to light, you probably won't find anything like that coming to light today. I think they've learned from past mistakes.
Yeah, but the thing is though about these conspiracy theories is like all of your conspiracy theories that you're like, oh yeah, conspiracy theories are real and they happen. They always deal with just giving someone drugs. Like it's like that's not hard to do. Like there's people in America that drug people and they don't know. I mean, there's like roofing out there, a fairly common thing in America. That doesn't even take the CIA to do it. That's just some random wacko sicko in some bar somewhere doing that. It doesn't take a lot to pull that off. It's like if some more random perv Joe Blow in a bar can smack a pill in someone's drink and do something crazy to him. I mean, that's not hard to say. The CIA could just go up to people, pretend to be a medical professional, or just slip in some drugs somewhere and then watch what happens to people. Like that's not like an insane conspiracy theory. An insane conspiracy theory, like I keep on trying to get back to, is like the chemtrails, the fluoride in the water controlling people's minds. Because like if fluoride's in the water and it controls everyone's minds, and the fluoride's in all water, and you're drinking it, well, clearly the government should control your mind, so you shouldn't even be able to question why the fluoride's in the water, yet you do. So that clearly is defeating the theory in itself.
Maybe so, possibly so. I'm a skeptic generally about stuff that's unproven, but if there's some evidence to it, I'll at least give a little bit of credence to it because sometimes they do turn out to be true. And also there has to be some people that actually are willing to listen because occasionally you'll have like a whistleblower or like a witness to like something bad that happened, and they'll come and tell people these crazy stories, and people initially want to write them off and say, "Oh, it's just another kook, they're crazy," or something like that. Shoo, go away. But sometimes it actually turns out to be true, and unless people are willing to at least hear them out until they realize they're either crazy or not, then sometimes you might miss things. Some people actually are trying to blow the whistle on something that could be bad or maybe something people need to know about, and you have to be willing to at least hear some evidence on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree on that, but like still, like if someone came up to you and was like, "Hey, like I just like someone just stuck me with a needle and injected me with something, I don't know what that was," I'd be like, "Oh, that sounds questionable." But if someone came up to you and said, "I was just abducted and these radars were shooting at me and they have my brain sitting there seeing the future, the past, and the present," I'd be like, "Okay, you're a little crazy. You need to go." And that's like that, like for example. Like the government, they have a portal to hell in Wisconsin. They go up there and they confide with the devil, and they figure out what to do. And it's like, okay, that's just crazy talk. And that's like what a lot of conspiracy theories end up turning into. It's like I don't know. I don't like the stuff. I don't like most conspiracy theories because like most, if not all of them, outside of the ones that you're talking about that turned out to be true, which are just experiments on people, which is pretty easy to pull off when you think about it. Anything further than that is just usually unfounded. Like none of them turn out to be true ever because they just aren't.
Yeah, what do you think about and also, by the way, it's the last thing I'm going to say about it. I see people getting antsy about us going on this rabbit hole right here. But the whole Havana syndrome thing, you remember when that was like a conspiracy theory? Like people were saying, oh, the diplomats at the embassy, they're getting hit with something that, oh, they said they got this little bit of like dizziness and stuff like that, and they're freaking out. They have like this memory loss, and they're getting headaches, and their heads hurting so bad they're wanting to crawl out of their skin. And then finally, after a while, it happened to enough people, and also got documented enough that they're like, well, wait a minute. It sounds like Havana syndrome is actually a real thing. It sounds like somebody is directing like some type of microwave energy at these people's heads, and it's causing actual psychological effects. So it actually turned out to be real. But that was a wild one, and they have still not told us what that was about. They said it was likely real, but they didn't ever say if it was actually who it was or how they were doing it, etc. They never said.
Well, yeah, but that one's real. I mean, like, once again, that's just something being done to a person and something within reason. I mean, like, if you stuck your head in a microwave and turned it on, that's clearly not going to be good for your brain. So if someone sits there and directs a microwave weapon at you, that's probably not going to be good for your brain. I mean, that's not like a far jump to make. But like if they said something like, oh, the government sat there and they took the vice president and they dragged him underground and they conducted a surgery on him and pulled his brain out and then put a new brain in that's implanted with all of his memories, but it makes him a drone to turn him into the government's, lapdog. It's like, now that's just crazy. And that's like I think the difference in the conspiracy theories that you're talking about and I'm talking about. That one's easy to pull off. A microwave thing, when you think about that, that's not that hard to pull off. A lot of the conspiracy theories that some people get into, I mean, they're just absolutely batty. Like, they wouldn't even make any sense.
Maybe so, maybe so.
But with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Marion Deemert, who puts in a $30 support. And thank you very much, Marion, for that second support of the night. And Marion has something here that's not a conspiracy theory. Marion said, peace and sorrow to the East Wing.
And I gotta say, it's a tragedy. I mean, I saw a satellite picture today of the East Wing, and it's literally been completely demolished. Like the entire wing over here has been demolished. And I see some people saying, "Oh, it's just a march of the future." But at the same time, that East Wing has been there since about 1912. It's as old as the Titanic is, sitting on the bottom of the Atlantic. And usually, you don't see people tear anything down to build something new. Usually, they just build something new. And no renovation has ever gotten to the point of completely changing the profile of the White House. Because what's going on, like here's how I'm looking at it, folks, and this is how I think about it, because I like to think I'm a little bit more architecturally minded than the current plan. The White House, as it existed, had symmetry, because it had the large central building, which dominated the sightline, and the two smaller wings that were smaller in height and also smaller in square footage. So it continued to make the White House building itself the main epicenter of attention, at least in the sightline. Now with this new addition, which is twice the size of the actual White House, the symmetry is being completely thrown off, and now the actual sightline is going to be the most prominent object is going to be on the right side. Then this is going to be the least, well, one of the least prominent objects, and then the Oval Office itself is entirely non-prominent at this point, and might as well be a tiny addition. So it's completely throwing off the symmetry of the whole thing, and I just don't like that. And I saw someone say, various presidents change stuff in degrees of scale. Yeah, but I mean, you know, not to the point of dwarfing the actual main White House building. Look at this right now. This is the extent of the modifications that have ever been done. It maintained symmetry, and not only that, it maintained the White House as the focal point of the sightline. Nothing has ever been done to change that until right now. Like, you can literally look at the building and see that as proof. So, I personally don't really like the whole East Wing deal. Like, if they wanted to change the East Wing up, but keep it around the same size, I would have been fine with that. But I don't like the idea of making a 90,000 square foot ballroom that is now going to dwarf the main building itself and completely throw off the symmetry. I don't like that.
You said 90,000 square feet for ballroom?
Yeah.
Damn, that's crazy right there. That's a lot.
Man, that's more ballroom than Lyndon Johnson even asked for on the phone with his tailor. You know, like, you got to give me more ballroom. It cuts me down there. It cuts me. Like, I was like, bro, this guy's like a little wild. I see someone saying the East Wing wasn't symmetrical. I don't think you know what I'm saying. As far as the height and size of the thing, it was symmetrical. Like, if I go and show you a picture of the White House, I'll prove the point to you here. Let me go look at the backside, or get you a wide shot of the backside. Let's see here. Is there a wide shot of the backside? So we'll look at the front first. Notice how the White House is the dominant building here. You can't really see the wings. That's the way it should be. That's symmetrical. The White House, which is the central building of the structure, is the focal point. If you look at any building that's built normally, the central building is the focal point. Look at the Capitol building. I'll give that as an example. The Capitol building, the two wings, the East Wing and the West Wing, are smaller than the central building, and the dome is the prominent central piece. It maintains symmetry throughout the design. Through that, it forces your attention to the center of the building, which is what you usually try to do. Look at any other example of any other building. Like, for example, the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, or, yeah, that is actually the Natural History building. Look at that. Symmetrical wings, and a central focal point which grabs your attention. It is symmetrical. That makes sense. And it's also visually pleasing. Now let's go look at the White House. We'll drop down right here in the area of the South Lawn. There you go. Both of the wings are one floor, and they're also far enough off that they keep symmetry with the building. While they're not symmetrical in their floor plan, they are symmetrical in the amount of sightline that they take up with the main building. And then you look at the White House, and it takes up the central piece. The trees accent it. It looks quite nice. As far as looking at this from a sightline, it dominates the picture. You're looking at the main building, which is the White House, which is the main part of the executive office, or the executive mansion. Now with the addition, what the sightline from here is going to look like is that this building is not going to take your full attention. It's actually going to be the big-ass ballroom off to the right in the trees. That's going to be twice as large as the White House. So you're going to be looking over there instead of the actual White House, which is something that I don't like, because one, is not symmetrical, and two, it also is insulting to the historic structure, which is the White House itself. Instead of the White House itself taking all of the prominence in people's attention, everyone's going to be looking to the right now to this giant-ass ballroom, which, to me, doesn't make any sense at all. So, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, because as far as an addition, this is going to be an unsightly one, especially for the symmetry of the sightlines and such, which generally is supposed to be a significant focus, and that's also why no one else has done anything like this. Like, let's see.
They could start by adding a little bit of water for that grass, though. That poor old grass is struggling out there. I don't know when that picture was taken, but I tell you what, somebody needs to put the sprinklers and turn them on, because it's not very green.
Yeah, I would say. And also, there you are. So look at like this is what I'm saying. The ballroom is as tall as the White House. It's also twice as large. And it's also not even in the center of the line of sight. This doesn't make any sense from an architectural perspective. That's what I'm saying. And then on top of that, then you're forced with then you're really forced to this. Then you have to destroy the West Wing, and then you have to build an equally large extension on the West Wing to either make it symmetrical, or you have to demolish this thing and then pretty much rebuild the East Wing as it was to maintain the symmetry. You have to do one or the other. But this is going to be symmetrically ugly. The best way I can describe it is that the White House is now going to look like one of those fiddler crabs on the beach with a giant claw, like an ungodly large claw compared to its body size, and then a tiny little claw over on the other side of its body. It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, in my opinion. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Andrew Barbaro, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that $50 support. He said, what WTF? You are me, and I am he, and we are we, and we will live together.
I thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I don't think I'm exactly understanding that, Andrew, but I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Old Warrior Fella, and he puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Old Warrior, for that support. He said, remember those anti-drone light planes shown with camo covers that made them obvious military you looked at? Ukraine geolocated them from the Russian newscast and eliminated them.
Oh, well, that's pretty good to hear. That's actually pretty funny. The irony of it, the Russians giving away their own operational security, an unfortunate thing for them, but a great thing for us. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Numerian, and Numerian said, good evening, Mindforcers, and safe travels to Utah.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and hopefully we will have safe travels all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah. And I'm looking forward to it, hopefully. Hopefully it'll be a nice trip, although we're really going to be pushing it every day to drive as far as we can. But hopefully it'll still be fun. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support, and thank you for the best wishes on the trip. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Rubber, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support once again. He said, hello, enforcers. And what is a good way out for Russia? And can they even survive the end of this war? And do y'all know about the nuclear clock? And Slav Ukraine, LSA forever, and good luck on the move to Utah. And also, by the way, I honestly think a good way out for Russia, and they're not going to take this, by the way, because they really can't, because their economy is going to collapse. The best way out for them is to immediately agree to a ceasefire, immediately. But the truth be told, though, as long as Vladimir Putin's in charge, it doesn't matter what is said. He's going to return back to Ukraine if he takes a ceasefire. So, their way out, a good way out for Russia is to get a new president right here. The dictator, not doing them very good. The whole Putin situation, not good. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with Enforcer Man on that. It is not a good position for Putin at the moment at all. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that this addressed that well. And we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Gerald Auten, and Gerald put in a 20, and thank you very much, good sir, as well. He said, good evening from New Orleans, and where you at? And I watch y'all every day. I miss y'all on Mondays, and #1 channel to get informed about worldly news and keep us informed, and LSA will never die, and laissez la bonnes temps rouler, Gerald.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are actually in Birmingham, Alabama. And really cool to hear that you're actually from New Orleans. New Orleans, a historic city here in America. And I got to thank you so much for enjoying our show every day. And I know people do miss us on Mondays, but we always have to make sure to recharge to get ready for the next 6 days. And also, on top of that, by the way, just to remind everyone again, we are going to be off air from the 27th of October to the 31st. We are going to be moving headquarters during that time to Salt Lake City. So we will not be able to run any streams or videos during that period. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And a big thanks to you so much once again for the kind words and the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Blind Man, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Blind Man, for that support. He said, Hello, Enforcers, LSA members, and Alan, and I hope your day is going well. And what are your thoughts on the US FFG 62 Constitution class frigate's design, ISV with variants, and the Chinese 6th generation stealth fighter, J-50, named White Emperor?
And let me go get the Constitution class. It's interesting. It's really more like a souped up Arleigh Burke, which I think is the right direction for the Navy. I don't think the Zumwalt or the Zumwalt due to cost reasons, and also the other attempts with the littoral combat ships were really the way forward. The Arleigh Burke is pretty much the universal platform, so it's good to see that the Constitution class is pretty much an evolution of the Arleigh Burke. I think that's a good move. And generally, I got to thank you massively for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep this thing running, so that way we can make this thing a reality every single day. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Stanley So Manly, who puts in a $20 donation. And that rolls off really well. That's Stanley So Manly right there. He said, could it be Russia and China could use South America to nuke us? And would we have time to react? And that's my conspiracy theory. Secure the hemisphere, boys. Nuke sniffing drones.
And I thank you for the support, and the answer is yes, but also no. Because they can already get us within 30 minutes of launch with an ICBM from Russia and China. So Venezuela isn't really changing the picture for them at all. If anything, if a hypersonic can travel at a significant rate of speed to reach anything in the United States, including Florida, which is about 1,300 miles away, and if we were to assume that a hypersonic missile is traveling at about, let's see, hypersonic speed, let me go pull it up really quickly. We'll go with the hypersonic missile speed. Mach 5 or faster, so 3,858 miles per hour. So if we go at 3,858 miles per hour, that means that it's still taking that missile about 25 to 30 minutes to even reach the tip of Florida, which means that if they put hypersonic missiles in Venezuela and they were nuclear armed, they still would take the exact same amount of time to just reach Florida that their ICBMs would to not only be launched from their point of origin in Russia or China or from a submarine, but to also make impact in the United States of America as well. So generally, it doesn't change the scenario. And while that was a very plausible sort of an idea at the start, we generally threw that out because it doesn't give them any sort of a major strategic advantage. It isn't cutting down on the attack time at all. It's actually the same length of attack time as an ICBM being launched from their very country. And that's also why we've never seen at this point anyone deploying strategic nuclear weapons closer to their enemies based permanently inside of another country. We only see that submarines are generally used for that these days, but they're never put inside of a country. And on top of that, at the same time, that also defeats the point of deploying a nuclear weapon stationed in Venezuela, because the Russians wanted to get a nuclear weapon closer to the United States. They just scoot a submarine closer to the United States, which pretty much once again achieves the same goal, but also ensures that there's a large amount of covertness and secrecy to the act instead of it being publicly known that there's a nuclear weapon in Venezuela. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a huge thanks to you once again for support. But I generally am of the idea, whether or not there's nukes in Venezuela, having a Chinese-aligned country in South America, especially near to the Panama Canal, is not good for strategic purposes. And if that was the way that we were marketing this to the public, I would be for it. I would say that this is a good move. But because of how we're marketing it, which is a fight against the cartels, and if that's really what we're working off of, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't know how this will result in any decreasing of the cartel's abilities or operations. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it rolling, and I hope that does answer that question incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Robert Krogan, and Robert puts in a 10, and he said, little something for the move, and wish it was more, and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and hopefully the move will go well. We have been packing all day yesterday and today, and we still have a little bit more to go tomorrow. It's not a lot at this point, really just mostly cleaning for now, but the move is getting really close to happening, and I gotta be honest with y'all folks, I'm getting a little bit nervous thinking about it, because of what I have to do as far as driving out there. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Man, I'll tell you what, we're going to have him shifting the 5-speed Spicer Rumbler floater cab with the with the sidewinder transmission. I tell you what, he's going to be out there ripping those roads down. I tell you what, burning down the asphalt. They say, hopefully out there not getting caught by the wind or anything like that. But moving on to our next super chat here, this one goes to John Combest, who puts in a 10, and thank you very much, John, for that support. I do not see a comment attached with it, but we do appreciate that very, very much. And also, by the way, for everybody asking, will we be doing road trip videos? I will be filming along the way out there as much as possible, or at least taking pictures. My plan is to film a good bit of it. That's my plan right now. And of course, it's going to be a little bit disjointed, kind of like the video about us going to Seattle that one time. It's not going to be super well produced because honestly, got a lot on my plate, to be totally honest. But I am going to try to film it though, because that's 4 or 5 days off, which we rarely ever take. And the payback is y'all get a video. So hopefully we'll have a decent one to show you. Hopefully it won't be boring or something, because all we're doing is driving for like 33 hours. But moving on to our next one here, this one goes to Dems Rico, who puts in a 10, who said it's more about protecting the Panama Canal.
I would generally say that's a good theory for it, and that would also make a lot more sense. I would be of that idea that would be much more of an imperative to go and fight Venezuela than fighting the cartels. So that's a decent theory. Unfortunately, though, I think you and I both may be mistaken. I think they actually are going for the cartels, which is why we're saying on air now this makes no sense at all, and I don't even get it. We've actually requested, folks. We actually did request for the Secretary of State to talk to us, so that way we could ask what the plan is here. What are we actually doing? And we never got a response, so I guess that's not happening. So unfortunately, we'll never get the answers, at least here on the channel. We're apparently not important enough, which was expected. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Juke Ever, who puts in a 10. And see, you guys work too hard. Here's some coffee monies.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And working hard or not working at all? That's the question. And I'd rather be working hard than not working at all. But I do thank you incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this channel a reality and help the world to keep turning around. And a big thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Where Are My Glasses, who said, I wonder if AI XBAT shows up in Venezuela.
I wonder. That's actually a really good question. And we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? But still, a really good one. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to James Hughes, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, James Hughes, for that $10 support. He said, are you guys having a going away party or a special, the best of the enforcers, the Alabama years?
Oh, I wish we could. There's been so many people who have asked me to go have a lunch with them, a drink with them, all that stuff that I know from around here. And I be dipped. They asked it when we got the busiest. Like, I hated it so much because it makes me feel so bad, because I really would like to hang out and have a lunch with the folks I know around here and get to chit chat with them one last time before we move on out of here. But dang, like we're so busy in the middle of the days right now, packing and cleaning and everything. And I was like, dang, I was asked yesterday, actually by a good friend of mine, if I'd be able to hang out for a lunch. And I was like, dang, I'm just so busy. And I was today, like no joke, I was absolutely swamped. I woke up this morning and I started packing and cleaning, and we were packing and cleaning literally up until I sat down to start working on the show. So like it's been crazy. Honestly, the show doesn't really give us a lot of time to pack or do anything for that matter, especially if there's a short war video to be made on top of that. So we have been absolutely going to the wall at this point, trying to get packed and cleaned and everything and make sure that we're ready to go. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Neil Vizanon. And Neil put in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Neil, for that support. And also, thank you for your patience. And then Neil said, LSA. And so I was bored and messing around with the AI on Twitter and ended up with an official proposal for a new missile system for the Navy that will save millions of dollars and will seriously kick ass. What now?
I don't know. Like we looked into the whole defense industry thing. It's really hard to even get the foot in the door there. But I do thank you so much for support, and very interesting to hear. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Max Daniel, who puts in a 10. He said, have either of you looked into the government's UFO hearings a few months back? And long story short, there's a black budget by private defense contractors used for reverse engineering alien tech. Now, Max, on that one right there, it is true. The U.S. has a black budget, and they find very creative ways to route money through things that seem like it's totally mundane. But it turns out that that $100,000 that went for some nuts and bolts, that actually went to funding a black project, an aircraft project. That's the way they do it, at least somewhat. There's a whole bunch more to it. It's very complicated, and you have to be a forensic accountant or something to figure all that stuff out. So it's very deep, but they do that. But at the same time, though, reverse engineering alien tech, I don't know. Like that's a big question mark for me. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I thank you for the support, but I haven't heard of a black budget to reverse engineer alien tech. And also on top of that, why, like, I don't know why it is in the modern day everyone thinks that we can't make advances unless for alien tech. Which is like a really big prevailing thing these days. That's another conspiracy theory, is that all modern military technology is the result of alien technology. And I don't really understand that one, because before the whole alien thing came around, like if you looked at the past 100 years before the 1930s, from the 1830s to the 1930s, in 1830, the fastest way to get around was by horse. There was no telegraphs. There was no modern sort of a firearm system rather than percussion caps, and those were just brand new. And you pretty much were still fighting line battles like you were in the 1700s. Fast forward 100 years later, from 1830 to 1930, and there are actual air forces in the world that are capable of bombing people from the skies. There are literal dogfights going on in wars in the 1930s. We're able to drop thousands of pounds of ordnance. We have bomb sites that can get you to drop a bomb within 50 feet of a target at 30,000 feet already by 1930 with the Norton bomb site. We have all kinds of advanced technology, massive seagoing ships, battleships for that matter, some of the most famous in history, by the 1930s at least. And all of these different forms of technologies. Hardly anyone ever dies in war, just 100 years after that, from disease. And honestly, looking at it from the lens of then, someone who was alive during that period could have easily gone, well, all of this new technology that we've gotten here from the 1930s, clearly it's so advanced from 100 years ago, there's no way we could have done this on our own. This has to clearly be some sort of alien technology. And I just don't really see the argument for that, because it completely discounts human innovation, which we are capable of a lot. And if you also look at anything, like as far as the development of them, it's a very slow baby stepping sort of a process to everything. Even flying wings like the B-2 Spirit, there was a really long stepping process that was done for decades before a B-2 ever flew. Literally from the 1930s all the way up till the 1980s, when the B-2 first flew and was then put into service, that got us to that point. And so there wasn't any alien technology involved. And on top of that, I just, like, if alien technology was being reverse engineered, wouldn't it be a lot more advanced than what we're making right now? Like, you know, like if we were reverse engineering that? Because if an alien made it here, they clearly have an ability to travel through space at insanely fast speeds with amazing energy production capabilities far beyond our measure. And yet we've never seen any of that just start to flow forth. Like, everything is always an incremental step forward, even still in the modern day, if you really look at it. And although it's exponentially growing in terms of technological ability, we've been exponentially growing in technological ability and competency ever since the Industrial Revolution first started. So generally, I would say reverse engineering alien technology, that's something I think might be a bit of a stretch. But a black budget, that certainly does exist, because we can't let everyone know everything about what we're funding and financing in the military. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Taoist Auditor, who puts in a 10. They said, Rabbit Hole, the Great Emu War, Australia.
The Great Emu War. To summarize, in the 1920s, emus, which are a bird native to Australia, were wreaking havoc on Australian farmers' crops. And so the Australian farmers petitioned the government to do something about it, and the farmers wanted to just go out there and shoot them. But that would require them to get guns, which the Australian government wouldn't allow them. So the Australian government decided that they would send the Australian army into the outback to go and try and kill the emus. after several years, they completely failed at killing really any of them. And so it was considered a defeat. The Australian army was defeated by a herd of birds. Emus, in short. And it was a really wild sort of a historical period in Australia. Not many countries have been defeated by birds. Australia is the only one that I know of. On the other hand, China did really good at killing birds. They killed all of the sparrows in their country, and then they went and had a great famine because the sparrows ate locusts, which then rapidly burgeoned out of control in population size, and then pretty much ate all the crops in China. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Paul DeSena, and Paul puts in a 10. He said, good luck on the move. And as for theories about Venezuela, what about the fact that they send 90% of their crude exports to China and enjoy the new place?
And thank you so much for the support. And that is true that Venezuela does send the lion's share of its oil to China, but we wouldn't want to touch it anyways. Venezuelan oil is called sour crude oil. Generally in America, what we use is what's called sweet crude oil, which has a sulfur content of less than 0.5%. All of Venezuela's oil actually has a sulfur content of higher than 0.5%. So there's this whole distillation process that we have to do to refine Venezuelan oil to even be refined in the first place, which makes it far more expensive to refine, process, and then sell. So generally, that's why no one has tapped into the Chinese market, well, in the Venezuelan oil market, but China, is because nobody really wants to touch such low quality fuel. So with that, I hope that does address that. Well, still, we shouldn't be allowing the Chinese to have that major of an economic connection with Venezuela. But at the same time, that's also why we don't get involved in buying their oil. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kimini Johansson, who puts in the 5 and said, what is the analysis of the intention letter by Ukraine to buy 100 to 150 JAS-39 Gripen E's from Saab? And will we begin to transfer the CD models by 2026?
I have a feeling that's highly likely. Ukraine has sent that letter so that way they can pretty much build up an air force of incredibly cheap and affordable fourth-generation fighters, or multi-roles, really. And that's their plan, is to try and streamline their air force and also have a dominant airframe that requires the same parts and is also cost-efficient to operate. So that's generally what the Ukrainian Air Force and the Ukrainian government is working towards at the moment. And I have a feeling that we're probably going to be seeing a large number of the Gripens being shipped to Ukraine because the Saab company has been dying for foreign contracts. They've hardly gotten any historically on the Gripen, at least for what it is, and the Ukrainians are filling out the largest contract request ever seen so far in history of the Gripen's production runs. So with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to some person you hate who puts in the 5 and said, drugs in America will always exist, and if you disagree, you are on drugs and LSA.
And I thank you for the support. That's generally true. They never will go away because if you know anything about drugs, in Britain, drug access like we have in America is fairly low. So I believe in Britain, the drug of choice is what, Matthew? Nitrous oxide, which is like laughing gas or something like that?
Oh, they do the whole wide spectrum of it too. It's just that's the street drug right there. They do the little nitrous and the balloons and stuff like that.
It's a little crazy, but still, people will always be looking for a way to get messed up or to push the boundaries. I'll agree on that. But at the same time, we can greatly reduce people's abilities to get access to that, which is what I generally am proposing with my plan of just strengthening the border and the Coast Guard, which would ensure that the supply available would be incredibly low to the point that you would have to pay an incredibly high premium to get it, which means that it's not affecting a large part of the population. It would only be affecting a very small part of them at that point. And once again, we'll never reach 100% efficiency. There will always be drugs getting into the country some way, somehow, but it'll be a far smaller amount by that point. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Retribution Film 7196, who puts in a 5 and said, you guys clearly have no experience with clandestine work. Look up camouflage through absurdity. They have standardized your mind. Oh, yes, I know. My mind's like an SAT test. It's a standardized test now. That's all it is. Just standardized. Like the dang fitness grand pacer test standardized type, stuff, But Enforcer, tell us more.
What the hell is this? Camouflage through design? Is that what he said?
Camouflage through absurdity.
let's see here. Absurdity. Let me go pull that up. Let's see here.
You see, they're in the in group. They're familiar with that clandestine work, unlike me. I'm a peasant.
Let's see here. There's literally nothing about this anywhere online. I tried to pull this up.
Holy moly. Are you telling me they told us something that doesn't exist? Are you telling me that?
You know, the only thing I can find, no joke, is razzle dazzle camouflage from World War One, and someone like photoshopped it onto the Queen Elizabeth. But this doesn't appear to be a thing that exists. This is kind of like one of those really crazy, like, esoteric conspiracy theory things. Oh, they've got you under their control where you don't question the system. No, I question the system. I just don't question it like I'm crazy. You know, like I'm off my meds, basically. That's how I'd put it. Like, why, like, reread that again, Matthew. I gotta really listen to that.
So here's what they said, Jamie. They said, you guys clearly have no experience with clandestine work. Look up camouflage through absurdity. They have standardized your mind.
That is absolutely, like, crazy. Like, do you have any work with clandestine operations? Probably not. Like, if you're talking like that, I'd assume you probably didn't pass the mental examination, like, in the military. So I bet you probably don't have any experience with clandestine operations either. You just pretend like you do because you read some sort of a military book on survivalism or something, and now you think you're an expert. But
they got the clandestine work portfolio wide open. They got on that CV. They said, one night, April 21st, 1951, the great secret Taco Bell run of midnight. It's the clandestine work. I'll tell you what, they tiptoed down there to the Taco Bell and got a cheesy gordita crunch that you've never seen before.
Man, Blood's accustomed to clandestine operations because every time his psychiatrist asked him if he took his pills, he said yes when he didn't. Like that, clandestine, like real clandestine. But look, man, like, no, like, if we were controlled by the government, why in the world are we sitting here saying, well, clearly this doesn't make sense fighting the cartels? Why would we say that? Also, on top of that, if everyone was under control of the government, why are half of the people in the country, members of the Democratic Party, and half of them a part of the Republican Party? If they were all controlled by the government, wouldn't the government just make them all think the same way, where they're all a part of the same political party? Wouldn't that make sense? Wouldn't it make sense? Like that would make entire sense. If we were controlled by the government, we would be just cheerleaders for the ruling political party, and there would only be one because everyone would think the same way because they're all wired to think the same way. Also, on top of that, you would, like, if this whole theory exists, which we can't even find on the internet because it's that niche. If that whole thing existed, why are you not a part of the mold? How did you fall out of the cracks and out of the mold where you're not camouflaged through absurdity and wired through your brain? And that's what I don't get about you conspiracy theorist people. Y'all always act like y'all are special. Like y'all had this special sauce. And that doesn't make any sense to me because you grow up in the same way as everyone else that you're talking about are the victims of this supposed conspiracy theory where everyone's having their minds controlled. You grew up in the exact same system. You went to public school, I'm sure. You grew up. You got a job. You did everything everyone else did. But for some reason, they didn't touch you. It's just everyone else that they touch. And for some reason, you're impervious to it, although there's literally nothing different about you than everyone else. That's what makes no sense about these crazy conspiracy theories like that. It's like, how in the hell does that even make sense? And like, the one thing that defeats every single conspiracy theory like that is if that was the endemic system in the country and everyone was a victim of it, how do you know about it and how do you break the mold when you're like everyone else? That's just crazy to me. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, but I gotta be honest with y'all folks, that conspiracy theory stuff like that drives me up a wall. Like, it really does. I'm like, I don't know how people can legitimately believe this stuff. Like, the absurdity of it is what drives me up the wall. That's that camouflage through absurdity right there. That statement is so absurd that it's camouflaging the craziness of the statement itself. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Blaze Gamer, who puts in the 5. And Blaze said, hello, guys. And if you heard of the World Tram Driver Championship, I found it out yesterday and thought it was funny. And here I'm Slava.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And a tram driver contest. Let's take a look at that. Tram driver contest. I don't think I could show it on screen. Huh. Concept. The tram EM competition is a team competition where each team consists of one female tram driver, one male tram driver, and one team supervisor. The competition is open to European public transport agencies who may submit one team each. The championship is split into 2 rounds, with each driver taking the controls once. Each round consists of 6 disciplines. The disciplines could be stopping at a target, emergency braking, measuring side clearance during a curb, stopping exactly at a tram stop, speed estimation with a hidden speedometer, precision driving past a gate, tram billiards, or bowling, or tram bowling. The skill at each discipline, in addition to the time to complete each discipline, influences the score. This is legit.
You said tramboli?
Tram bowling.
Oh, tramboling. I thought you said tramboli. I was
Stromboli!
Tramboli.
Bro, we both knew where that one was going. But look at this. It's tram bowling. He has a ball that he hits with a tram, and then he tries to knock down the pins.
That's kind of wild right there. Actually, I kind of like that.
This is
Very
actually
European.
This is actually like pretty cool, actually. I honestly would go and watch this. Like, not that like I'm like heavily invested in this. This just seems like really neat, like in a curious sort of a way. I just go watch it for the hell of it. But that is really, look at this. Let's see, the winning country. Oh wow, man. Let's see here. Let's look at the winners. Apparently there was no winners in 2020 and 2021. Nobody won for some reason. But
Everybody took a big fat L that year.
Bruh, Austria hitting them with the nepotism. It's held in Austria, and Austria wins. It's like, oh, I wonder why. Let's see here. Hungary won it in 2012. France won it in 2013. Spain won it in 2014. Oh, look, a little bit more nepotism there. Spain held it, and they won it. Austria held it, and then the Netherlands won it. Germany, and then Hungary won it twice. France then won it a second time, and then Sweden won it again. Oh, well, Sweden won it for the first time, and then Belgium. And then Germany won one. And then Austria won the one in 2023, Hungary won the one in 2024, and Austria won the one in 2025.
Oh, it was the plague. That's why they didn't have it during 2020 and 2021. The plague was going around.
Oh, yeah. Now that makes sense. It says it right there. I can't read, folks. I can't read. But apparently Hungary has the largest wins under its belt with 3 wins amongst the nations. So that's very interesting. That's incredibly interesting. The 2023 edition. Bro, they have editions. Let's see. Huh. That's very interesting, honestly. Oh, wait a minute. Let's look at the countries that competed. Prague competed. Wow. Prague was up there. And Gothenburg was up there, too. And then Stockholm was 4th. Dublin was 6th. Basel was 10th. Let's see here. Who was 25th? Dresden. That makes sense, you know, the whole East German deal going on. 2024 edition. Budapest won, number 1. Wow. What? Oh, Birmingham!
Memorandum.
Birmingham was number 14!
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Wow! The Brummies were up there in the top 15. And also, Slovakia was tied as well. Bratislava, Slovakia was tied for 14th. But very interesting, honestly. Also, who was... Dang, dude. Vienna dusted them in this year, apparently, in 2025. They had 300 points more than Poznan, Poland, when they won.
That's kind of wild right there.
Dude, Kiev took 5th.
Kiev,
Ukraine, they took 5th.
wow.
I did, like... Oh my god, San Diego was on here. I thought you had to be from Europe, but apparently not. They were number 21 in the competition.
That is crazy.
Dude, they need a rep from Salt Lake City, Utah from the track system to go out there, bro. They're gonna win for sure, I'm sure. This is actually really cool though. I did not know about this, and this is a really cool rabbit hole. So a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Crispy and Plazov. Crispy put in a 5 and Plazov put in a 3. And thank you both very much, Crispy and Plazov, for that support. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 2 from Bruce Lee. And Bruce said, Maduro won Enduro, an aircraft carrier.
Maduro won't endure an aircraft carrier, a Gerald R Ford. Oh man, Maduro's gonna be falling down those stairs like Gerald R Ford did. Goodness, he fell like a far away too. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert Krogan yet again, who puts in a 2. And he said, attack using the cover of the hurricane, maybe.
Oh, I would doubt it. It would be really hard to conduct combat operations with an ongoing hurricane in the area. But I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Cody Fritz. And he said, get some of that Casey's gas station pizza.
Casey's gas station pizza? We have Hunt Brothers here in the South. If it's anything like that, I'll be getting it, because Hunt Brothers is some solid stuff from the gas stations. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert Krogan yet again, and he puts in a 2. He said, it won't get you much for your trip. Maybe Smarty.
Oh, I like Smarties. I mean, thank you so much for support. We will use that for Smarties. Smarties are pretty decent. Like, they're not, like, wildly flavorful, but they are quite sweet. And for a sweet fix, it's not too bad. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support, and we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jeremy Vahill, who puts in a 2. He said, wait a minute, I think I doubled this one actually right here. He mentioned talking about the Australian Emu War.
Huh, interesting. I think that might have actually been doubled. But I do thank you so much for the support, Jeremy Vahill, and helping this channel to keep on rolling once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Max Daniel, who puts in a 2. He said, a video from an F-18 was shown UFO to Congress. And it is true. There is a lot of videos out there from the U.S. Air Force which appear to show aircraft doing weirdly odd maneuvers in the sky, but nobody knows if it's aliens or if it's, you know, the U.S. government testing something and maybe these pilots weren't read into the program or something. It could be either way. I would tend to believe it's something terrestrial versus something extraterrestrial personally, but, you know, anything's possible, I guess, but I would tend to lean toward a practical explanation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would also tend to lean towards a practical explanation for those sightings, because, you know, like a pilot who sees something that is a government test project, he's not going to know about it because they don't get to read everything about everything going on. So they'll be about as shocked on seeing that as all of us would be, although it is most likely just a government project that's being worked on at the moment. So with that, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Dubstep Kid 801, who put in a $1 super chat, and thank you very much, Dubstep Kid, for also helping to keep the channel running. And with that, folks, it is now time to move into our live chat questions proper, including our Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Airbug Arbo, our Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Kobiateric, Sire, and Brian Blairstown. They said the Morse says, whatever a Russian got to do to get some oil money, well, they got to ask for the enchilada and the LT LSA.
And that is the sound of the money. And listen to me very carefully, all right? You go back to the Costco, all right? You go to the back, all right? You ask for Vinny, yeah? And then you sit there and you tell Vinny, I want the enchilada. And then he takes you to the back, and he gives you the whole enchilada. But y'all didn't get that dead on the nail. Whoa, hey, yo, no diddy. But anyways, when I
come to the back, I'll give you the whole enchilada. What, excuse me?
Man, you come out there and go, when I was coming down, man, but beyond that, y'all did get that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I gotta say, a big shout out to the Least Experimental Signal Corps for getting that correct on the 1,339th day of the war. A truly incredible and amazing thing. And so, a big shout out to all of y'all once again. And with that, we actually have one more super chat to cover before we get into those live chats. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Ross Nib yet again. He threw in another 20 Australian, and thank you very much, Ross, for that support. He said, fellas, I hope you get to enjoy the drive to Salt Lake City. And it's a long drive. It's a long enough drive, but lots to see along the way beside the roadworks. And will you consider passing through Dodge City, Kansas? And that place has a ton of history. You know, and I hate to say it, Ross, but sadly, our drive out to Salt Lake City is going to be, we're not going to have time to enjoy anything, honestly. We're going to be driving nonstop pretty much. Not the entire, like, 3 or 4 days, but we will obviously take breaks to, like, obviously have lunch and things like that, but we won't really get to enjoy anything. It's a pretty intensive drive because we have to make this very fast because we have to be able to set back up to be able to start streaming again as soon as possible. So we would like to enjoy it, but due to our obligations here on the channel to run the streams, we have to make it fast. So unfortunately not. But Enforcer, what say you?
Unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to go and see Dodge City, at least right now, which is very sad because I would love to make this a really cool road trip and get to travel around, but at the same time, y'all are all counting on us to cover the news, and we take that very seriously, insanely seriously, to the point that we actually drive ourselves to insanity to make sure that we are generally doing right by all of y'all and keeping this news running. So unfortunately, we really can't take a detour to go take a look at cool places. Our trip is very utilitarian on our route. It is literally trying to get to Salt Lake as quick as we possibly can. So unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to look at that, but I would love to because Dodge City is a really cool place. But a humongous thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Ross, because folks like you make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Ryan H. on Wheels, who put in a 5. He said the White House ballroom should take inspiration from Crown Burger restaurants. There can even be a drive-through for Secret Service and LLC.
Oh man, I would hate to see that. Also, one other thing, by the way, folks, like just to ask us about the ballroom. When is the ballroom going to be used? Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's a ballroom. Why would you be against a beautiful ballroom? Don't you like balls? And I would have to say no. But beyond that, when is it ever going to get used? Like, when in the world are we just going to be holding balls commonly in the White House? I mean, beyond the questionability of that, which, there's nothing wrong with that if you do like doing that. But at the same time, how often are we going to be doing that in the White House? Because would that only happen when we have over heads of state from other countries? That only happens like 4 times a year. So we're completely blasting away the offices of aides and everything else to go and just have a ballroom to hold balls. And that sounds so wrong when you say it like that, too. And that's the way you're supposed to say that. That's correct English. Is that they're holding balls in the ballroom, and I don't like that now that I'm saying that, folks.
They used to have a fellow working for the government, at least I heard. His nickname was Big Balls. I think he was involved with Doge, I think if I have that proper. But it would be interesting that if they build the ballroom over there where the East Wing used to be, ripped to the East Wing, by the way, historic thing, gone forever. But anyways, beside that, though, they could invite Big Balls to the ballroom. That they could do that.
Listen, folks, the last time anyone held balls in the White House, it was during Clinton's administration. I think we moved far beyond that. I think we have moved well beyond this. I think we need to leave that in the past, where it is, the place of history, that whole deal with the cigars and everything. We need to leave that there and just leave the East Wing the way it was. I think that's the best thing. We do not need balls being held in the White House. That's not a good move, and it doesn't sound that great when you really say it like that. That's like if I was the president, I was like, oh yes, we hold balls here. I'd be like, you know what? I think I'm gonna have to resign. Effective immediately, I resign the presidency. I don't know about it. And someone said, changes through history, give it a rest. Hey, listen here. This is my channel. I'll give it a rest when I want. And secondly, I'm not going to give it a rest because it's throwing off the whole symmetry of the thing, and I don't like that. Like, I know some people, they, like, worship folks and everything because there was, like, a ton of people who worship Biden, and so whenever we said he did anything that we didn't agree with, everyone wanted to go bitch until the cows came home. And I know that a lot of people love this guy, so whenever we say, oh, that doesn't look like a good move, people want to add, like, drop it! You can't insult him! But this is absolutely stupid. I haven't heard of such a stupid idea in a minute. Making a 90,000 square foot ballroom. This isn't an antique store. Like, this isn't Pappy's Antique Store that's 180 square feet with tons of antiques in it. This is the White House. And making a ballroom that's twice the size of the actual executive mansion is not only, in my opinion, insulting to the original structure, but it's unsymmetrical, unsightly, and ugly. And it also completely diminishes the significance of the West Wing, which actually looks somewhat symmetrical, at least in height and size, to the East Wing. And it completely throws all that off. So I don't like it. I'll give you my 2 cents on that. If you don't like hearing that, that's unfortunate for you, but you're going to hear it anyways. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And we also have a super chat from Rebecca Bruce. And thank you very much, Rebecca, for that $10 support. They said, thanks for you both, what you do. Let me rephrase that. She said, thank you both for all you do in LSA.
Hey, and LSA, and a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and thank you for enjoying what we do. It means a lot to us, and I got to thank you incredibly for that and helping this channel to keep on running. And before we move on, someone else said, who cares? It doesn't matter. Oh, goodness gracious. I know that this would have mattered under any other administration. I remember when a new Smithsonian was built, because I remember things. I'm not someone who's like a little drone that listens to my party people and pretends like everything's fine, because I don't really affiliate with either party. But I remember when a new Smithsonian was built on the National Mall, which is this one right here, the National Museum of African American History, and everyone went just absolutely batshit over it. Oh, it's ugly. Oh, and then everyone freaked out about it, because it was insulting to the rest of the National Mall because it didn't have an architectural style that aligned with the rest of them. So that whole thing came and went. So now that we're actually talking about a historic structure, the White House, and it being modified, now everyone wants to everyone wants to act like it doesn't matter. Like if someone told you that they were going to rip down the dome on the Capitol building and rebuild it to look totally different, I'm sure a lot of people would say that that wouldn't matter. I'm not one for augmenting historical structures, being someone who's a history major. I generally like to leave them alone in reverence and respect to the buildings. Like, that's not being political, that's just my straight up opinion on dealing with historic structures. Keep them the way they were and just restore them and maintain them the way they originally looked. I don't like the idea of ripping down a whole wing to make something that's massive and obscene, at least in size, to the actual main historical building that takes up the grounds of the executive mansion. So with that, we're moving on to the next one.
All right, so moving into our live chat questions, we need to grab some live chats. This one goes to Northerner, who said, are the Russians still able to buy food at this point?
They're still able to buy food, but it's getting pretty tough to be able to pull that off. So I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Cody Fritz, who said, question here, will the on-air time change? Will the time zone change?
No, it won't. Actually, this is a really lucky thing for us, because usually in Central Time, we start this thing at 9 o'clock. Now in Mountain Time, which Salt Lake City's in, we'll be starting this thing at 8 o'clock. So we'll actually be rounding out the stream at a more reasonable time, usually every night, around 11:30 local time instead of 12:30 our time right now. But the show will still run at the exact same time of day for all of y'all around the world. Y'all will still be able to count on the stream running at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That time won't change. It's just that the local time for us is going to change for when we have to go live. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for asking about that, because a lot of people have been wondering about that, and I'm glad to know we were able to give an answer. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one is a super chat from Taoist Auditor 1483 once again, who put in a 10 and said Razzle Dazzle was used to make it harder to estimate ship distance, and Razzle Dazzle works on AI trying to work out what it's looking at, so it might make a comeback with tanks, or maybe AI is better.
Maybe it is better, but I actually have heard about that. Apparently, odd geometric shapes actually do throw off the AI, so that's really interesting, and I wonder what camouflage of the future is going to start looking like here in the next few years. It's going to be really interesting. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a live chat question from Ron, who said, the big question is, will the Russian people rise up against the government sometime?
Well, the Russian people rise up. I don't know, actually. We've always thought that they would, and they haven't yet, which has really diminished my faith that the Russian people would ever rise up against their government. And so I would say that it's a fairly unlikely thing, at least in my opinion. So I hope that does address it well, at least my 2 cents on it. And also, someone said this. I get it. Someone said it's been renovated so many times since Truman. Let me look. White House. 1949. Let's go here. Hang on. I want to go get a picture of the outside of the White House during this year. You know, we'll go with 1950, so that way it's not during the renovation, it's right after. Oh, where in the world's a good picture? There we are. So this is the White House as it existed in 1950. So let's go pull up a picture of the White House today. Because some people say, oh, it's been renovated a lot, like it's completely changed in its appearance. This is the White House today. This is the White House in 1950. Does it look the same? The answer is yes, it is the same. It looks exactly the same. So when people say there's been renovations going on since 1950, they've never changed the external appearance of the structure in any visible way. Like Obama had the tennis court, the indoor tennis court, ripped out and replaced with a basketball court, but that still didn't change the physical appearance of the structure outside and completely throw off the symmetry, the sight lines, and everything else. I mean, hell, like just bringing this up, he didn't even run this by the actual historical commission for the building and asked them if this was a good idea. He just did it, and then they're even saying that's going to throw off the symmetry and it's not even going to look good. So I mean, it's not like this is, you know, just a little if and but thing. I mean, this is a 90,000 square foot ballroom being added to a 55,000 square foot executive mansion. It's literally dwarfing the main building. That's not just like a small modification. It literally is a damn palace being built right beside the original structure. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So our next one goes to Sire Productions, who said, "What's the Russian boneyard look like lately from satellite?"
They're practically empty. Let me go see if I can show you Russian boneyards, tank boneyards. Let me see if there's any pictures on Google really quickly to show of this. Let's see. Let me see. Then and now. Let me type that in and maybe we'll be able to find it really quickly. Dang. It doesn't look like we can. I'd have to go and through my maps and try and find them from way back. But they're pretty much just largely empty. They're just pretty much empty grass fields at this point, and there's usually a couple of stragglers left behind that just were not good enough for refurbishment and were abandoned wherever they were. So with that, I hope that has addressed that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one is our second last question from the night, which goes to Andrea Scout, who said, "Are there tobacco and contraband balloons flying over Vilnius, or are they the doo-doo variety?"
They're contraband, from what we understand. Cigarettes, cigars, and stuff like that. So I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Fortnite, who said, "What is the average lifespan of a Russian tank in Ukraine?"
The average, actually, we don't know that, as a matter of fact. I assume that it's a couple of weeks or months, somewhere in between there. But I actually do not know the real figure for the average lifespan of a tank in Ukraine. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, folks, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching this stream tonight. I hope you all have enjoyed it greatly, because I know that we've enjoyed running this stream for all of y'all incredibly well. Of course, if y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Ram Slava, long live the Least Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us yet again tonight. And we will see you all tomorrow, maybe for a midday show or video if there is enough news to cover. And also, tomorrow is another busy day of packing up the Enforcer Studio from HQ 2.0 or 3.0. I can't remember which one it is, but we're moving to our next one, which we'll have to get the numbers straight some of these days. But anyways, we will see you all tomorrow, definitely on the stream at 10 p.m. Eastern. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.